Madam Secretary, welcome to the City Planning Review Session on this 72nd anniversary of D-Day, I believe. And Madam Secretary, please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. This is a City Planning Commission review session. Today is Monday, June 6, 2016, and a quorum is present. We will begin today's meeting with a presentation by Jennifer Gravel of the Housing, Economic, and Infrastructure Planning Division here at the Department of City Planning. She's going to present citywide employment trends.
Good afternoon. Pleased to be with you this afternoon to share some of the research that I've been working on with my colleagues, many of which are in the audience today, on recent trends in employment. I'm going to just quickly, briefly, I'm going to give an overview of what the historical trends in sort of wage and salary employment has been in the city, and then focus on really what has happened since the recession and the growth that's occurred, particularly since 2010. And look very closely at where that's happened geographically, how those jobs have been distributed in the city. Take a special focus on industrial manufacturing trends, which is something, questions about which come up frequently before this body. And finally, going to take a look at some data on self-employment trends, which has been growing quite rapidly in the city. So major takeaways was really, in the last 5 years, since the end of the recession, New York City's economy has added really an astonishing 500,000 private sector jobs. This is pretty phenomenal. We've really recovered all of the losses and then some due to the 2008 financial crisis. Jobs are growing both in transit-rich central business districts in Manhattan and downtown Brooklyn, as well as in local neighborhood streets in all 5 boroughs. There have been huge jumps in employment in the food services and ambulatory healthcare sectors, which is fueling new investment in commercial corridors throughout the city. And we're also seeing that the industrial areas as well have really bounced back and seen job growth in both industrial and non-industrial employment. Although the growth, as you'll see, is widely distributed across economic sectors, they were heavily concentrated really in 3 sectors: healthcare, food services, accommodations, and professional services. And these are sectors that tend to have high concentrations of occupations that are both low skilled and relatively low paying, and very high skilled and very high paying. So there's this, as it's been happening nationally, a kind of bifurcation of the labor market, and it's happening here as well. A quick explanation of the data used for this. The wage and salary employment is an analysis of data from the New York State Department of Labor. It's a series called the Quarterly Census of Employment and Wages. When you hear national reports of employment statistics, often this is rolling up from data collected by the state. And what it is it's basically a census of businesses who have employees covered by unemployment insurance. So when we talk about private employment, this is the universe we're talking about. Also for the sub-borough level, when we get at low-level geography, we have confidential data that we get annually directly from the state that we geocode and can do really precise and very specialized analysis with. Some of the historical data in here that you'll see comes from some older DCP publications. So briefly, as of 2015, New York City had about 4.1 million total jobs, of which about 3.6 million were in the private sector. This is probably near an all-time high, if not an all-time high. In the last 5 years alone, the city added 500,000 jobs. This is certainly the largest 5-year gain since 1980, if not the largest 5-year gain ever. Just to put it into perspective, the city of San Francisco has a total of 580,000 jobs. We added almost that many jobs in the last 5 years. So it's pretty phenomenal. And as I'll show you in a moment, very highly distributed across sectors. Just to give a sense of where those 3.7 million private jobs, how they are distributed across industry sectors. The diversity of the city's employment may explain some of its economic resiliency and our ability to recover so quickly from the recession. Of those 3.7 million jobs, about 24% or 870,000 are in the health and education sector. So this would include both colleges as well as elementary and private schools. It would also include ambulatory healthcare, hospitals, and offices of physicians. These are obviously sectors that are growing very rapidly, as well as home health care services. The next large piece of the pie is professional services and information. This accounted for about 650,000 private jobs in 2015. This is a very diverse category. It includes legal services, accounting, architecture, engineering, advertising, computer system design, scientific research, media, film, advertising. So when people talk about, a lot of times you hear about TAMI, technology, arts, media, and information. A lot of those jobs are falling in the professional services bucket. Retail and other services includes both local and destination retail and grocery stores, as well as laundromats, nail salons, auto repair, civic organizations. It's a pretty large sector at 15% of total jobs. And finance and insurance, and real estate are both really kind of legacy industries in the city, still represent a rather sizable proportion of the total employment at 12%, about 450,000 jobs. This is down from the 1988 peak, but these sectors have recovered pretty well from the recession. Oops, sorry. And then the next sort of very broad category are what we call sort of collectively called leisure and hospitality. So this is arts and entertainment, accommodation and food services. When you hear these sectors, you're really talking about, of course, performing arts. You're talking about hotels, museums, spectator sports, restaurants, and bars. And this is about 12% of the total jobs in the city. Transportation and wholesale, rather significant at 260,000 jobs. And these are primarily companies engaged in the distribution of goods, especially food, in and around New York City. The transportation sectors would also include bus companies and taxi and limousine services. Admin support is a rather sizable chunk as well, and is also growing. Firms in this sector really include companies that provide support to other businesses, such as call centers and document preparation services. Investigation and security services would be an administrative support, and all the companies that service the city's many buildings would also be in here, as well as waste management would get captured in this category. And then construction and utilities are really the companies that provide the city's businesses and residents with electricity, cable, gas. They construct new roads and housing. They also maintain and repair our vast stock of aging buildings and infrastructure. And in 2015, about 150,000 people worked in that sector. And in manufacturing, which it had about 78,000 jobs in 2015, represents just only about 2% of the city's total private employment. Just put this in perspective, it's down from about 33% of total private employment in 1950. So over the decades, the economy has transitioned pretty dramatically from sort of industrial economy to service sector economy. And the next slide really shows this trend going back to 1950. New York City's economy has not always been as diverse as it is today. It was once heavily dominated by manufacturing. You can see the blue line here is services, which is because of the reclassification of some of the industries over time. Services today would include the very large bucket of healthcare and professional services, accommodation and food services. It's a very broad and very large category, as you can see, has grown quite rapidly, and far exceeds what manufacturing ever employed. Manufacturing has grown rather steadily, but has somewhat leveled off here in recent years. As you can see, finance and insurance also sort of peaked in the late 80s and has leveled off. And retail has, you hear a lot about sort of retail pushing out other things, has remained relatively flat over the decades. And some of this is more recently transition, although the population is growing, tourism is growing, and jobs are growing. There is a big shift into online purchasing, so I think that probably keeps that in somewhat in equilibrium. The next several slides look at those 500,000 jobs. What sort of industrial sectors were they in, and where did they go? So the recent job gains since 2010, as I mentioned, are pretty remarkable. And what's really astonishing is that every sector seems to have benefited from this. The only sector that didn't really have any notable growth was utilities, and it basically remained flat. Even manufacturing experienced some growth. It's relatively small, but it was a net gain of about 1,700 jobs. I'll point out most of those jobs were not in M zones. A lot of those jobs were in Manhattan and were probably office space. But excuse me. Most notably, the jobs are really heavily concentrated in accommodation and food services, which is dominated heavily by restaurant growth in the restaurants. Professional services, what I mentioned, is a very broad sort of group of professional TAMI type businesses, and healthcare are really dominant. They accounted for more than half of all of the growth, those three major sectors. If you take a closer look at those three major sectors that experienced significant growth since 2010, and look at what are the subsectors in there. So when you talk about accommodation, food services, what kinds of businesses are we talking about? Healthcare, what are we talking about? You see that the largest growth is really in the number of restaurants, which added sort of almost to 65,000 employees in this period, and then followed by home health care, both of which are sectors that tend to hire rather low-skilled and somewhat low-paying occupations. These are followed by several sectors that will typically require highly skilled and relatively highly paid occupations, such as computer system design, advertising, and consulting, as well as a number of professional sectors within the medical field, in hospitals and offices of physicians. If I'm going too fast, just let me know. So the next few slides really look at where those jobs went, to try to understand what.
Would it be better for you, Jen, if you were interrupted by questions?
Please, if you'd like to, or I can, yeah.
There you go. All right.
Okay.
I just have one question and one
Ms. Efron.
clarification.
Yeah.
So these are jobs located in New York City,
Jobs,
not
yeah.
individuals who live in New York City.
So this data here is based on the establishment, which is reporting employment out of a location in New York City. So it's at the work location.
Okay, so we have no corresponding unemployment figures, just to sort of sense.
Unemployment figures.
In other words,
yeah.
if we could match up unemployment in the same period of time with those jobs, I think we'd have a general understanding of whether they were jobs being filled by people who live in the tri-state area.
Yeah, I mean, we
or-
could look at data from the ACS on residents, New York City residents, and where they're working and the workforce that they're in, to get a sense of where what kinds of jobs New York City residents are moving into. There's certainly data on that. I don't have that today.
No, that's great. I just wanted
Yeah.
to clarify that
Yeah.
it was New York City jobs, but not the residents aren't necessarily New York City residents.
No.
Mr. Cirillo, did you? Okay. Ms. Levin?
Jen, this is really great. I'm glad you're doing this. But thanks for taking a pause for some questions. Just for context, you're talking only about private sector jobs here. Do you have, off the top of your head, know how many government sector, public sector jobs there are?
Well, if you include city, state, and
Yeah,
federal,
yeah.
I think it's close to 500,000. And
Yeah.
that tends to be less.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
quite a bit smaller. This is the chunk of our,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
If I recall, actually, it's probably above 500,000 because between public and private sector jobs in the city, it's approaching, if not at, 4.3 million.
okay,
Current,
so and if
yeah.
this is
So it's
3.7,
another
then
two.
What?
we can do the math.
Yeah.
On the
Okay.
restaurant jobs, do you have any breakdown of that between chains and in standalone restaurants?
Yeah, no, we don't. I don't know if you could parse that out from this data. I mean, we know the number of employees per institution, but
Right.
then you'll only get probably just get
Yeah.
this individual location, may not necessarily be an indicator. It's really hard to tell without looking at the name of the business, so.
Yeah, it's just interesting to know from an economic standpoint whether
Yeah.
the growth is, sort of sui generis, or is it, homogenization of all of these services across the country?
I don't know. In a minute, I'll walk through the geographic distribution of the trends, and it is pretty widespread. I tend to think it's more localized, maybe less homogenization, but.
I don't want Jen to get ahead of herself, but I do think that one of the areas of inquiry is how do these subsectors compare to the rest of the country, the rest of the region, in terms of how job growth is occurring nationally, how job growth is occurring in the region. And that's a stage of work yet to be done.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jen.
Certainly, sometimes you do this work and you raise more questions than you answer. So sometimes that's okay, as long as we think we're asking the right questions. So moving along. We are fortunate every year to obtain from the state confidential third quarter data from the quarterly census of employment and wages. And this is, I think, a data source that's not really widely available. We get the individual records, and we're able to geocode it to the tax lot. So we are really able to do highly customized, very detailed analysis on covered employment, people who are working, or wage and salary employment. And so the next several slides really looks at, we cut it in several different ways. How did it happen across neighborhoods? How did this growth occur by borough? How did it occur by our zoning districts? To get a sense of what is the relationship between economic growth and land use planning, quite frankly. And what this map shows is the distribution of the job change between 2010 and 2014. And we chose these 2 years because 2014 is the latest geocoded data we have available. And you can see is that the jobs were, when aggregated by neighborhood tabulation area, so these are the geographies created by our population division that roughly approximate our neighborhood boundaries, the jobs are pretty widely distributed. Obviously, a very heavy concentration in the Manhattan Central Business District. There were also significant job gains in commercial centers in Long Island City and downtown Brooklyn and Flushing. But clearly not every neighborhood gained jobs. You can see in the red and the orange there are some neighborhoods that lost jobs. I should point out, when you get to small geographies, and particularly when you get to areas where the employment is less concentrated, the movement of a single particularly large employer can cause big swings in the data. So for instance, if a hospital closes and is a significant amount of employment in that neighborhood, that might be enough to but probably, yeah. I'm not allowed to disclose that information.
In Staten Island.
That's the red dot.
And what about Staten Island?
And feel free to interject. This next slide attempts to try to create a sort of categorize the covered employment by our traditional sort of land use and zoning designations. They're not necessarily the same thing. When we talk about a manufacturing job, doesn't necessarily mean something in the manufacturing sector is we're not always talking about the same manufacturing zone. So this is sort of a taxonomy that attempts to sort of sort these things out. And when I talk about these categories later, basically referring back to this taxonomy. There's basically kind of a mutually reinforcing relationship between employment patterns in the city's built environment. Employment grows in locations, obviously, where there's demand for those sectors, but as well as where there's suitable space. Because economic activity, so the economic activity and the supply of commercial space is really influenced to a certain degree by zoning, but also by what's going on in the market. And obviously, zoning will dictate how big the buildings can be, how much parking you can have. I mean, this is, you all know this pretty well by now. And so this is a kind of a high-level taxonomy. So when you talk about office-using tenants, they're really heavily concentrated in professional services. When I talk about the sector of professional services, I talk about those trends. Typically, they're office-using, but not always. Finance, insurance, real estate, the administrative support services sector, and typically, obviously, concentrated in the city's commercial districts, particularly in Midtown Manhattan, but also downtown Brooklyn and Long Island City. There's also, I should point out that there are also many M districts, particularly in Manhattan, that have higher density loft buildings that have predominantly office-using tenants at this point, because buildings have large part transitioned, although not entirely. Retail and entertainment is another large category. This includes retail entertainment uses, hotels, other uses that would typically fall into this category include other services, so things like laundromats and nail salons, hair salons, food services like bars and restaurants, arts and entertainment like theater, music venues and museums. These types of businesses would typically get captured within these zoning use categories. The very large and growing healthcare and social assistance and educational services sectors would often be classified as community facilities in our zoning. So you'll see in a moment there's a lot of this growth in the places where we allow community facilities. And then industrial uses, when we talk about industrial in the context of this presentation, often the uses we collectively define as manufacturing and zoning. These are things that have processes or operations during truck traffic, have impacts. So we're usually talking about manufacturing, wholesale, transportation, construction, auto repair, utilities, waste management, and increasingly film production. And these things tend to be concentrated, obviously, in manufacturing and commercial districts. Although I should say there's a lot of, there are many businesses that are classified, for instance, as manufacturing and construction that do have a significant amount of office space employment in the city. So many times you'll see sort of growth of these sectors outside of M zones, and a lot of that is reflecting the office space employment. So if you take a look here at the employment trends by these major categories, so you have sort of in the first bar here the total private employment and how those jobs gain between, this is 2010 and 2015, how they're spread across the boroughs. You can see that more than half of the jobs went to Manhattan, which is not a big surprise. You did have a significant amount of 44% of all the employment growth happened outside of Manhattan, which is pretty phenomenal. If you look at those sectors that tend to be the educational, health, and social services, you see the majority of that growth happened outside Manhattan, but still a significant amount in Manhattan. Industrial jobs, you can see Queens had the most, at about a third of the industrial jobs were going to Queens. Almost a third went to Manhattan, again, to my point about there being a significant amount of office using employment within the industrial sectors as well. And about 20% in Brooklyn. Manhattan is still where many businesses seem to be wanting to move their offices to. It's also where we have the greatest supply of office space. Almost 80% of the growth within those sectors that I described as office-based were in Manhattan, but Brooklyn also had some significant growth, gaining almost 13% of those jobs. And then the retail, food, other services, accommodation, arts and entertainment, a lot of things you see, and these are widely dispersed in commercial districts, commercial overlays, even in our M zones as well. A little over half of that was in Manhattan, but you also had a significant amount in the other boroughs as well. And then just point out quickly, sometimes the businesses are not unclassifiable or not, so there's about 18,000 jobs that were not classified in any particular sector, somewhat evenly distributed throughout. This next slide explores how, specifically focused on Manhattan, and looking at how the jobs break down by sector and then within zoning districts. And as you can see, so the first bar here, these are our office districts, our C4 to C6 districts. These are our industrial, our manufacturing and C8 districts, residence districts, local retail, so like commercial overlays in C1 and C2 districts, and then our mixed use or MX districts. You can see that in Manhattan, most of the jobs are going into the commercial districts, and it's not a surprise. A significant amount of that you can see in the orange here is the office using sectors. This pink is really those retail, entertainment, and accommodation sectors. M zones in Manhattan also absorbed a lot of jobs, notably a lot more office jobs than industrial jobs. So the M zones in Manhattan do seem to continue to be functioning as supporting the office growth as well. And then not an insignificant amount of jobs going elsewhere. It's interesting, though, is if you look at the trends outside Manhattan, it's pretty different. This is this pie chart just shows the basic distribution by these broad zoning categories. And you can see is that 42% of all of the jobs gained between 2010 and 2014 outside Manhattan went to the commercial overlays. 21% of those jobs went to M and C8 zones, and an almost equal amount went to our residence districts. The commercial districts are not a lot of the job growth happening in commercial districts, and the inventory is pretty tight there. And you'll see in a minute, some of that is not only driven by tight inventory, but also the types of sectors that are growing and where they want to be in the populations that they serve. So if you look at the similar breakdown as the manufacturing chart, you really see it's really the growth in the healthcare and food services that's driving some of these trends. So you see these are the commercial overlays, local retail streets. This blue is education, healthcare, and social assistance. So you really do have a lot of ambulatory healthcare, which has grown rather significantly, really serves local populations and is wanting to be in places that are more dispersed and near those populations. Retail and food services, likewise, is also moving into a lot of the commercial overlays. M zones also absorbed a lot of the jobs. The green, more industrial jobs in Manhattan, I'll point out, but non-industrial job growth tends to outpace industrial job growth, even outside Manhattan within M zones. Residence districts gained a lot of jobs. You can see the blue here is educational, healthcare, social assistance, a lot of which are probably located in community facilities, which are permitted in residence districts and are widely dispersed. You do see, curious, wondering why are there industrial jobs showing up in residence districts? If a business may have employees that may not have an office, their employees may work at job sites, or like construction, for instance, is an industry in which a lot of the employees work at job sites. The owner of the business may just report the employment out of their home, so there's some of that going on as well. And mixed-use districts gained some jobs as well, rather distributed throughout the types of major industrial categories. Okay. Industrial and manufacturing trends. The next few slides really focus more outside Manhattan, because as I sort of explained previously, really the office-based growth is really kind of driving the trends in Manhattan. But if you look at, this is a chart that kind of shows the change in the distribution of sectors over time, going back to 1978. And as you can see, the dark purple is manufacturing. The lighter purple are those other industrial sectors. So that's construction, wholesale trade, utilities, and transportation and warehousing sectors. Manufacturing, like citywide, has declined rather significantly, but the other industrial sectors have remained relatively stable over time, have not seen as steep declines outside Manhattan. If you add Manhattan, those declines increase a bit. Interesting, finance has increased. Finance, insurance, and real estate increased marginally, not significantly outside Manhattan. Retail, I'm sorry. This is in retail trade, which is here, has, as I mentioned before, not changed significantly over the years. But the other non-industrial, and this is picking up the professional services, the healthcare accommodations, those things that have really grown rapidly, that is really driving the job growth in the city. So a closer look at breaking down some of the industrial sectors. You can see what some of the trends are. Again, not to sort of belabor this point, but manufacturing was declining and has somewhat stabilized here since 2010. The other industrial sectors, you have transportation and warehousing, which is this pink line here. This is really mostly construction, although it's a large grouping that includes natural resources and mining, but predominantly construction. And this is wholesale trade. It sort of has ups and downs, but in recent years has started to tick back up, mostly in line with broader economic growth. This slide tries to see how do our industrial business zones, which are the areas that were believed to be the most active industrial areas when they were designated in 2005, how do they compare economically to the other manufacturing districts outside Manhattan? So again, this excludes Manhattan. And you can see is different points in time, 2000, 2008, 2010, and 2014, how many total jobs are there, and what is the share between industrial and non-industrial employment? And indeed, the IBZs were and continue to be the city's sort of more active industrial areas. They do continue to be predominantly industrial, and we've actually seen, along with the non-industrial job growth, we've seen industrial job growth within IBZs, and generally speaking. Outside of the industrial business zones, these areas have begun to transition to more non-industrial employment, particularly in recent years. There's a lot of information on this slide, so I'll try to break it down for you. Over here these are subsectors within our industrial classifications that I mentioned, and how they have broken down between the industrial business zones and the other M zones outside Manhattan. So this is total employment in 2014, which is the most recent data we have at this geographic level. And then this is the change in those jobs since 2010. You can see the two sort of biggest ones are specialty trade contracting. And specialty trade contracting, these are in plumbing and HVAC, and these are the contractors that really take care of our really vast and large building stock. And then you have grocery and related product merchant wholesalers. This is food distribution primarily. These are pretty far and away the largest employers within both IBZs and for specialty trade contracting is pretty well distributed throughout all of the M zones. They're also showing the more robust growth. You hear a lot about bus parking and complaints about bus parking not generating many jobs. It does in fact generate one of the highest job generators in M zones, but that's because those companies need to park their buses somewhere. But there's quite a bit of employment associated with that. Food manufacturing is one of the bigger sectors, and it's within IBZs it's growing. And what is sort of notable on this is that many of the larger sectors that have been doing well and that are large and prevalent in our manufacturing districts are very truck intensive, tend to require sort of land intensive horizontal operations, which has certain implications for certainly as planning as we move forward. This is a bit of a case study to look at how have M zones sort of fared over time. The data here are based on the manufacturing zones in Brooklyn along Newtown Creek. It's roughly contiguous with the North Brooklyn Industrial Business Zone, which is an area that the agency has spent a lot of time studying recently. And digging through some of our old files, were able to find some surveys and some reports that had almost exactly the same geography. So there was a study done in 1969. This was based on a survey from the Department of City Planning, and at the time, the report said they believed this was an undercount, about 42,000 industrial jobs in the North Brooklyn Industrial Business Zone. They didn't even bother to count the non-industrial jobs, that presumably there were some. The next point for which we have data for the same geography was from the 1993 citywide industry study, which had 1991 data from the Department of Labor, which estimated that there were about half that many jobs in that geography. And as you can see, and then we have geocoded data that we've been getting directly from the Department of Labor going back to 2000. As you can see that jobs generally in the North Brooklyn IBZ continued to decline until 2010, and we've started to now see this reversal. There's been a gain both in industrial and non-industrial employment. So this is a good thing for M zones, which for decades really didn't see a whole lot of investment. So, but the upshot is that there's competition for a limited amount of space, and we hear a lot about that here. And finally, we do get a lot of questions about what's going on in manufacturing. So we did try to take a sort of a closer look at what subsect. Manufacturing is pretty broad. I think it's probably the most, pixelated of the various industrial groupings, and there's probably 100 different kinds of manufacturing. So if you look down at sort of the subsector level, as I mentioned before, manufacturing stabilized, but I should point out, when we talk about job gains in manufacturing, if you think of it as on a base of 500,000, if you look at those jobs that are growing outside, in M zones, outside Manhattan, so those jobs that are more likely to be production focused, we're talking again of about net 400 jobs. So in the aggregate, it's a relatively small piece of the pie, but the trends by subsector are a bit different and certainly look better for certain subsectors. And apparel and leather product manufacturing, highly competitive industry, difficult to do here. A legacy industry has continued to see pretty steep decline citywide, but is showing some very modest growth in the IBCs. Chemical manufacturing is also something that historically there has been a lot of. It's pretty flat. What's interesting about this is the green bar is IBZs, the pink bar are the M districts outside IBZs. They're sort of the more high-tech, presumably higher skilled jobs appear to be locating in places outside the IBZs, and I'm not sure if that's because of what they do, where they want to be in those places, or if what they do is really more office-based. I'm not sure, but it's sort of an interesting trend. And then the most significant growth is really happening here at food and beverage manufacturing. You hear about that a lot. And then this is a sort of a category of, aggregated category of several sectors that we put together called construction-related manufacturing. This is things like fabricated metal products, woodworking. In New York City, machinery manufacturing includes a lot of elevator manufacturing. So it's very closely tied to the construction sector. So we called it construction-related manufacturing. And when you look at several sectors together as construction-related manufacturing, it's actually done pretty well, as well as furniture and related product manufacturing. The next few slides, I can take a pause if there are questions.
This is an inflection point. So anything on employment data before Jen goes into self-employment? Ms. Delauze.
And Jen, this is a lot of information, getting it all at once. I'm going to have to take time, I think, to integrate it all. But you've mentioned a couple different times how you have unique access to state data, and I know how hard it is to get that. So you're right, it's really rich. So to that end, I'm just wondering, do you have median wages by sector?
So yes. We have requested this, but we have a special data request that we've just started to work through, putting together a sort of a work program now to put together that analysis.
Okay.
But we have wages by occupation, by industry, so that we can see. Unfortunately, we don't have a time series. We can't go back in time, so we only have the most current data. But we can see by occupational categories and by sector what the wages are.
Okay.
It's certainly, I think, an important part of the dialogue. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the other question I have is part of the plan moving forward to take this information and then model it against changes in public policy and how it may have impacted particular sectors. So, whether it's certain land use actions that reduce the, total manufacturing square footage in an area, how that may have impacted the jobs in that sector, or, the fact that we have a tax credit for the TV and film industry, and how's that driving, jobs in that sector? Is that part of the thought of this?
I think that, I don't know that we would quite so directly as part of this. I think the idea is to give you the information to help inform these decisions.
I think it's fair to say that thanks to Jen's work, we've created a database, and it enables us in the future to, when we're either considering land use changes or potentially when we're looking to see if something happened, to, in effect, use this database as probably not the only, but certainly a very important input into public policy. I think, as we know, a lot of, there are a lot of factors that have nothing to do with land use policy that affect employment trends. And the best example probably is the film credit, which is by all accounts, directly related to film employment, but to the extent that we can look at any particular sector, this is going to be an important database.
For sure.
Sure, we could
Yeah.
model statistically significant changes, I guess.
Yeah.
Ms. Efron?
Thank you. It's really complex in a way that is very, very, very exciting. And two trends on this last slide that show as non-IBZ M zones that I think are particularly worth noting, and I'm wondering if there's any corresponding geographic information,
Okay.
is the computer and electronic product manufacturing and the advanced manufacturing. Advanced manufacturing, I bet, is a fairly new category, but both of those, I wonder if they're tied to educational institutions and where they exist in the city.
Perhaps, yeah, I mean, we could look at that. Advanced manufacturing this is not a Department of Labor standard definition. You hear a lot of talk about advanced manufacturing, but it's not like a real category of business, not a real classification. I think we used a definition that seemed most compatible with the data we had from, I believe this is the New Jersey Department of Labor that had a definition. So this particular definition, there's a lot of like pharmaceutical and robotics and some of which when you look in New York is probably not all that advanced. A lot of it's like legacy kind of stuff. So I think in a way that New Jersey is maybe highly tied to research institutions and pharmaceutical companies. The advanced manufacturing here is probably a little bit different. It's something that we haven't done much work in. I think EDC has done more work on what this is and how to define it. The computer electronic, this is also, if you look at, these are on a rather small base here. When you think the city has 4.1 million total jobs, so this is, you're talking about hundreds of jobs, so it's not huge.
But it's growing.
It's growing.
Any other, Mr. Cirillo?
Thank you. This is terrific information. Thank you so much. Just a quick question, and I don't know if I missed this at the very beginning. Does this reflect all full-time employment or full and part-time employment, or is that dealt with separately?
It's, I believe it's full-time equivalent is what it's reported. Do you know for sure, Eric? Oh, Eric can clarify.
It's every job. So
Every job.
if, you're XYZ company and you have 30 full-time employees and 10 part-time employees, it would show up in this database as 40 jobs.
It's 40 jobs. And is there a period of time that the job needs to exist for it to count in the data? Using
yes,
this, if it's one day, does that?
These are data for the third quarter of each year. So if it exists for the entire third quarter, it's one job.
Okay.
If it existed for 1 month out of 3 months, it would be a third of a job. That's the way they count it.
Understood. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, soldiering on. Go ahead, James.
We're not done yet. Self-employment trends. If you just talk about wage and salary employment, you're really only talking about part of the picture, particularly in New York. So the next several slides look at what is going on with self-employment. So more New Yorkers than ever are working for themselves. In 2013, the latest year for which data are available, about 844,000 New Yorkers were self-employed or counted as non-employer establishments by through a series that the Census Bureau puts out annually. And this includes individuals who file tax returns as corporations, sole proprietorships, and partnerships. So it should be picking up a lot of the independent contractors as well as business owners who don't have paid employees. I should point out that there are many people who will get earned income from work that also have paid salary employment. So we shouldn't really think of this as additive to the total jobs, but it does give a sense of the entrepreneurial activity and the contract employment.
But just to be clear, it is partially additive,
Yes, for
in the
sure,
sense
yeah.
that there are however many people who do not have separate employment but are self-employed. And so this would be, there's obviously a significant overlap, but what we don't know yet exactly what that overlap is, but a significant portion of this 840,000 people are in addition to the 3.7 million people.
Yes, I think that's fair to say. So briefly, how does the distribution of the self-employed jobs look by industry? And as you can see, it's a bit different from wage and salary employment, although it's still concentrated in, broadly speaking, the service sector economy. The biggest two, we have other services, which is funny, other, but it's the biggest one, is really dominated by occupations in personal care and services, so things like administrative support, manicurists, childcare providers. These are the sorts of jobs that get picked up in this. And in a city like New York, where there's a pretty big economy for that, it's not surprising that a lot of this is showing up in the self-employment data. Professional, scientific, and technical services, I mentioned before, a really diverse category, tends to include very concentrated and highly creative occupations requiring high levels of educational attainment. So the profile of these workers is probably very different from the profile of these workers, although I can't say that I know specifically what it is. Healthcare and social assistance, again, you saw the tremendous growth in home health care. There's probably some of that showing up here. Transportation and warehousing is much higher on the list of distribution jobs within self-employment than it is in wage and salary employment. This is taxi drivers and bus drivers would probably be getting picked up here. A lot of those workers are probably independent contractors. Real estate, I think it's not that uncommon for people to have LLCs or corporations filed as for real estate investments in companies, as well as brokers working as independent contractors. Arts, entertainment, recreation, I think not surprisingly, a lot of artists are self-employed. And construction is another one where I think it's not unusual for either a contractor to be self-employed or to supplement their employment with side jobs, for instance. So those are the kinds of things that are getting picked up in this data. A lot of information on this slide, but this is a look at what have the trends been, the growth in self-employment, and I should say specifically, it's called non-employer businesses is how the census describes these, but it's basically a proxy for self-employment. You can see this is 2004 with the distribution of total self-employment by borough has increased pretty steadily, adding, since 2004, between 2004 and 2013, 167,000 non-employer businesses added in the city. With particularly in Brooklyn, I would say has been rather significant job gains. When you compare the ratio of non-employers to wage and salary employment, and then compare New York City to the state and the country, what you see is that New York City has a higher rate of self-employment. It also grew at a faster rate, particularly after the recession, and has declined somewhat more steeply since the recession. Although I think total self-employment continues to rise. It's not rising at a rate in the last few years as quick as wage and salary employment, so you can see it leveling off, and that's probably due to businesses hiring again. And finally, this looks at the growth in non-employer establishments by borough. So this is the growth. So between 2004 and 2013, in which sectors and in which boroughs did self-employment grow. And the biggest growth is really professional scientific services, scientific and technical services with a lot of growth in Brooklyn. I should point, unlike the wage and salary data, which is based on the employer location, this is based on the residence. So this is where self-employed people live. So these are actually New York City residents. So these are Brooklyn residents. They might actually be working in Manhattan, but we only know that they live in Brooklyn. administrative support, and waste management. This includes, like I said, a lot of call centers, for instance, would fall in this category. So probably that's a lot of independent contractor work. And you have a lot of Bronx and Brooklyn and Queens residents working in those sectors. Transportation warehousing, again, mentioned, includes a lot of drivers, bus drivers, taxi drivers. Again, big increases in the Bronx and Queens. And construction also increasing along with that sector as a whole, particularly big source in Brooklyn and Queens. Other services, which is the largest of the sectors for self-employment, also continues to grow, particularly in the boroughs outside Manhattan. And finally, arts and entertainment. Brooklyn residents working in arts and entertainment are also growing significantly. Interestingly, Manhattan seems to be one of the only places that's showing really any declines in self-employment by specific sectors, and perhaps it's because those residents are getting priced out. I'm not sure, but it's possible. And that concludes. That was a lot of information.
Thank you, Jen. Questions for Jen? Starting with Mr. Knuckles.
Well, it's, I guess, a question seeking an observation. After decades of analysis about New York needing to veer away from the fire industries, it seems like this data would confirm that it's no longer a fire industry-dominated city.
No, not at all. And they're still significant and important, but that's a good observation.
And obviously, as Ms. Dello's observed, this is not related to income, where financial services continues to play an outsized role in
Yeah.
terms of its economic impact on the economy. But you're right that for the city, this is a very good news story in the sense that it shows the diversification of the city's economy and presumably an ability to a cushion to somewhat greater extent than in the past the economic downturns, particularly financial services economic downturns. Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, thank you so much for this. One observation and one question. The recent growth in sectors, there was a real emphasis on accommodation, food services, and retail trade, the two sort of that jump out at me as being potentially driven by visitors and the strength of our tourism sector. And so that brings me to a question, which is, we can begin to identify a number of industries that perhaps through our strategies and our, implementation approach we should be supporting. And so what are the next steps in this data? We've got all this great information. How do we then, who does the analysis that allows us to understand what it means in terms of the kind of land use policies we should be perhaps thinking about in the future? And obviously not just land use, all policies across the board, but sort of what are the next steps here, and how do we get to an interpretation that perhaps is a consensus of understanding of what it really means for the city and the direction we want the city to go?
That's certainly a good question. More immediately, we would hope that as we do our various planning efforts, that this information is available to our planning staff, as well as senior staff within the agency to help form some of the recommendations that we have. There is more work we have to do to try and understand what's going on. I think we want to understand some of the self-employment trends a little bit better. We do have data on wages and occupations by sector that we would like to understand, because I know sort of equitable growth is also something that we want to take into consideration. So we have some more work to do, but I think when we make recommendations and we cite studies, we'll be citing these studies? 'Cause do you think that this is the best data that are available?
So ultimately,
And-
these will
and
inform
I would just say, we have,
recommendations?
I understand, shared this data certainly with EDC, and we will also share it with others, agencies, because, just to your point, I mean, the issues or the data itself gives rise to not only land use considerations, but economic development policy, conceivably transportation policy, workforce development policy, and the like. So there are now, with this data in hand and more data presumably to come as this work continues, there is a tremendous opportunity to provide a significant database into rational public policy making.
Yeah. So will this become the basis of a formal set of recommendations or a formal analysis, or?
I think at this point, it's really mainly to put together a database, and it could lead to a number of policy recommendations down the line in a number of areas. But I wouldn't say that the goal at this point is to come up with, at the moment, one comprehensive policy for economic development for the entire city of New York. It's really more a question of how we use it, how we use it in an applied sense in very specific areas. It may ultimately lead to a broader policy, but I don't think that's been the immediate goal. Ms. Delos.
Going to the applied sense and the self-employment trends, which I find very interesting, and obviously I happen to know about a particular geography in Brooklyn where this is a very big trend, and in terms of how it's impacting land use patterns and the market. But I guess the question I have, and I guess it kind of goes beyond perhaps this, but, you know, I think some of these folks really shouldn't be self-employed, right? Should not be self-employed based on the law. But that's part of what I think is going on in terms of enforcement by the Department of Labor. There's a lot of people who have been classified as independent contractors, you know, being forced really to be employees, which, you know, by all rights they should. So I guess, you know, especially during this period of time, I would just be interesting moving forward to look at this moment in time versus moving forward. You know, obviously we'll see what happens with elections, but, you know, there's been an impact on how the Department of Labor is looking at independent contractors in a very big way.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, clearly we know that there are a lot of, how many in this data, we don't know, but there clearly are people who should be classified as employees who are classified as independent contractors. And I suspect in this category, there are also people who are, quote, self-employed, but aren't really making any money. And I think part of the negative, the downturn that you saw in self-employment in the last slide is because people were hired. So, so it is a dynamic situation, but nevertheless, we also know, and this really does go to ultimately the land use policy. If this is, as it probably is, even with those caveats, a growing part of our economy, what does that mean in terms of land use, in terms of live workspace, in terms of co-working and the like? That's all. Ms. Efron.
Thanks. I also think it shows a certain, if you overlay the transportation infrastructure on here too, particularly regional transportation, not just subways and buses within New York City, I wonder if it shows an interesting trend too, because I keep looking at the far eastern edge of New York, the Long Island edge, where there's a big blue bump. And it's hard to tell. It doesn't look like it's one employer, because it's either very dark blue or medium dark blue, so it's somewhere between 5,000 and 30,000 jobs, right, on the far right.
Yeah.
It's JFK.
It's at JFK.
Is
at
that
the airport?
at the airport?
I'm not sure which.
No, so
you're
what
talking-
is that, like
JFK is
Rosedale?
down here. What is?
No,
No, no, up on the
JFK is here.
no.
Yeah. Oh, here.
It's, yeah, it's Long Island Jewish Medical Center.
I thought it was a hospital. So,
You know, I think we need to be a little cautious about that because they may have just reclassified jobs that were somewhere else. So when you have one very large employer in an otherwise residential neighborhood, you have to be a little cautious about interpreting the data.
that's really helpful, because I was going to say, is there an overlay of our public assets, right? Our hospitals, our colleges and universities, and can we make assumptions about if you place them there, employment increases or not? Because it seems to me that is a land use aspect that we only haphazardly in response to, or
Yeah, I mean, the tendency has been, you know, in terms of hospitals, certainly, some hospitals have closed and other hospitals have gotten bigger. And Long Island Jewish just went through a very large building program. So they may have taken some employees who were outside the facility and brought them in when they completed their construction project. And that's probably reflected in that map.
is it safe to assume the Bronx is the same situation?
Yeah, it could be in some cases. I mean, that's just one that's very obvious, because there are no other large employers in that area.
Okay, any other questions at the moment for Jen? I'm sure you'll have others as day progresses, but we'll have Jen back for an encore. Very good. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Okay, on to the regular calendar.
So our next presenter is Beverly Jimenez Talavero. She's going to be presenting the Lexington Gardens proposal, which involves zoning map amendment, zoning text amendment, special permits, UDAP designation, project approval, and disposition of city-owned property to facilitate a mixed-use building containing affordable housing in the East Borough neighborhood of Manhattan. So,
Good afternoon, Commission members, Chairman Weisbrod. The applicant, HPD, and Lexington Gardens LLC is seeking approval of a zoning map amendment, special permit for bulk modifications, special permit for a reduction or waiver of parking, UDAP designation and project approval, and the disposition of city-owned property, and a text amendment to Appendix F. The project site is located on the east side of Park Avenue between East 107th and East 108th Streets on Block 1635, lots 1, 7, and 16. The remainder of the block is occupied by an existing building, which is 108 units, sorry. You can tell I'm pro-development. 108 unit subsidized Section 8 development. The project area in its entirety includes that existing building and the remainder of the block, and is bounded by Park Avenue on the west, East 107th Street on the south, East 108th Street on the north, and Lexington Avenue on the east. This view is looking south. The existing building was completed in 1985 and contains approximately 108 units of Section 8 housing. The building has ground floor community facility space along Lexington Avenue and a surface parking lot for 25 required off-street accessory parking spaces. The remainder of the site is used by the city for parking. So the city currently uses the majority of this site for parking for the New York Police Department and the Housing Preservation and Development Agency. This view is looking north, with Park Avenue on the west, Lexington Avenue on the east, East 107th Street to the south, and East 108th Street on the north. The existing building is outlined in yellow, and the development site is outlined in red. There are several NYCHA campuses in the area, with the DeWitt houses to the north. They are approximately 18 stories tall, and they provide 749 apartments. To the west of To the west, on the west side of Park Avenue, is the Lehman Houses. These are a 20-story building that provide approximately 619 apartments. So this development includes one city-owned lot, which is Lot 1, and two privately owned sites or lots, which is Lot 7 and 16. The area is primarily residential, although a C84 zoning district is mapped on the east side of Park Avenue between 106th and 110th Street. In 2003, the city rezoned the majority of the blocks east of Lexington Avenue from R72 to a mix of R7A, R7B, R7X, R8A with a C15 and C25 commercial overlays along the avenues. These views show Lexington Gardens in the first photo. You're looking from East 107th Street. The second photo is looking north through the city parking area. The third photo is looking from the corner of Park Avenue and East 107th Street. And the fourth photo is looking east from Park Avenue. The first photo is looking south from the corner of East 108th and Park Avenue. The second photo is looking south from East 108th Street. The third photo is looking southwest from Lexington Avenue and East 108th Street. And the fourth photo is looking at Lexington Gardens on the corner of Lexington and East 107th Street. The proposed development involves the creation of a large-scale general development encompassing all of the project area, which is designed pursuant to the proposed R9C24 commercial designation, the zoning designation, I'm sorry. R9 districts are mapped along several major thoroughfares in Manhattan, such as 96th Street. New buildings can be developed under height factor regulations or optional quality housing regulations. The optional quality housing regulations in R9 are the same as the R9A regulations. The FAR for height factor tower buildings range from 0.99 to 7.52, and as in other height factor districts, a taller building can usually be achieved by providing more open space. Parking would be required for 40% of the dwelling units. C2 districts are commercial districts that are predominantly residential in character. They are mapped along major thoroughfares in medium and higher density areas of the city, such as Lexington and 2nd Avenues on the Upper East Side, and Columbus and Amsterdam Avenues. The maximum commercial FAR is 2. In mixed-use buildings, commercial uses are limited to 1 and 2 floors and must always be located below residential use. This graphic is looking north. And again, with Park Avenue on the west, East 108th Street on the north, Lexington Avenue to the east, and East 107th Street to the south. If approved, the requested actions would facilitate the construction of a new, predominantly residential, mixed-use building, which would be 100% affordable, and which will be is a proposed project and will be mapped as a mandatory inclusionary housing area. 390 units of affordable housing will be provided, 3,201 square feet of commercial space, 38,053 square feet of community facility space, public parking garage, and accessory parking garage. The proposed development would occupy 3 corners of the block. It would occupy Park Avenue and East 108th Street. It would occupy East 108th and Lexington, and it will occupy Park Avenue and East 107th Street. The proposed project has several uses that would be accessed from the ground floor. A community facility would be located on the corner of 108th and Park Avenue. It will have entrances on the corner of 108th and Park and within the mid-block of East 108th Street. There will be two entrances to Lexington Gardens 2. One entrance
Beverly, what
be-
would that community facility be?
I'm sorry?
What would that community facility be?
That community facility will be a school for disabled children.
K through 5?
Ages?
K through 5?
I'm not sure the ages, but I'll check.
You understand it's an elementary school, so that would be consistent.
District 75.
There will be two entrances to Lexington Gardens 2. One entrance would be from Park Avenue, the other would be on East 108th Street. A ground floor retail space would be located on the corner of 108th and Lexington Avenue, and it will have one entrance on Lexington Avenue. Two garages would be accessed from the ground floor. An accessory parking lot would have an entrance on Park Avenue, and a public parking lot would have an entrance on East 107th Street. The proposed development will target a mix of incomes up to 165% of the AMI. The recently approved ZQA text defines 195 units at up to 80% of the AMI and as income-restricted units. There are three types of waivers associated with the proposed project: street wall location waivers, building height waivers, and height and setback waivers. The orange color represents where the proposed building doesn't comply with the required street wall location. And you can see that along Park and basically on the corners of the proposed building. The blue color represents the building exceeding the maximum building height, which occurs on Park Avenue and on East 108th Street. The forest green color represents the building exceeding maximum building height without providing the required setback. This graphic basically shows you the same thing, but the colors are a little different. The proposed development has varying heights at different building modules, ranging in height from 8 to 15 stories, and you can clearly see that along the 108th Street frontage. The blue color represents where the building exceeds the maximum building height. You can see it's set back from the street wall. The green shows the building exceeds maximum building height without providing the required setback. And the orange represents a building that does not comply with the required street wall location. Again here, the orange represents the building that does not comply with the required street wall location. The green represents the building exceeding the maximum base height without providing the required setback. And the blue represents the building exceeding the maximum building height. The top graphic shows East 107th Street, where the building exceeds the maximum building height without providing the required setback, because East 107th Street is a narrow street. The bottom graphic shows East 108th Street, which is also a narrow street, where the building doesn't comply with the required street wall location. The blue color represents the building exceeding the maximum height along East 108th Street. Also on the corner of East 108th and Park, in green, it shows the building exceeds the maximum building height without providing the required setback. The top graphic shows where the building exceeds the maximum building height on Lexington Avenue in blue. The bottom graphic shows where the building does not provide the required setback on Park Avenue. The first graphic shows the undulating wall going in and out along East 108th Street. It shows the varying modules, heights ranging from 8 to 15 stories. This graphic also shows where you will have access to the residential building in the mid-block and the community facility on the corner of East 108th and Park. The second drawing shows the proposed Park Avenue frontage, and you can see the residential accessory parking lot entrance in the mid-block. The first graphic shows the existing building in orange and the proposed building in gray along East 107th Street. The public accessory garage has an access and egress point here. The second graphic shows the Lexington Avenue frontage with the existing building in orange and the two ends of the proposed building in gray. The ground floor retail space has an entrance near the corner of 108th and Lexington Avenue. The height and setback modifications requested will facilitate the development of a taller building under the otherwise applicable quality housing regulations. However, when measured from the height factor buildings on the adjacent blocks to the north and west, opposite the proposed development's primary frontages, the impact on light and air is minimal. The top graphic shows that the proposed development's East 108th Street facade is not overwhelming to the built form of the area and to the Lehman houses which are located on the west side of Park Avenue. The bottom graphic shows Park Avenue frontage, which is consistent with the existing building heights in the area. The first graphic shows the north side of East 107th Street, and it shows the proposed development in relation to the Lehman houses to the west, which are approximately 20 stories tall, and the existing Lexington Garden building, which is 75 feet in height. The bottom graphic shows the west side of Lexington Avenue looking west. The DeWitt houses are on the north side of East 108th Street, and they would be the tallest buildings in the immediate area at approximately 18 stories tall. This rendering is looking west down East 108th Street, and you can see the Lehman houses in the distance and the existing Lexington Gardens building down Lexington Avenue behind the proposed building in orange. So the applicant has requested 2 special permits pursuant to sections 74-753 and 74-532, and has submitted findings that support their request. And in summary, the applicant has provided information that says, the applicant explains that the waivers are necessary to achieve a better site plan than would be possible under the general applicable regulations. The location of the proposed development, without regard for height and setback regs and street wall reg requirements, will result in a better plan and a better relationship among buildings and open areas to adjacent streets, surrounding developments, and adjacent open areas than would be possible without the proposed waivers. And pursuant to section 74-532, the statement is where the applicant is seeking a reduction of parking spaces required by section 2523, such reduction will facilitate the creation or the preservation of income-restricted housing units. The proposed development will target a mix of incomes up to 165% of the AMI, and the recently passed CQA text defines 195 of these units up to 80% as income-restricted units.
Thank you, Beverly. Questions? Mr. Knuckles and Ms. Delos.
Beverly, this doesn't go to the project or the special permits requested, but it was a part of the text, and it's a terminology I just wanted to clarify. Where you talk about the legal ownership of Lexington Gardens, which is a part of the project site, and it says that under the Article 9 exemption, legal ownership of Lexington Gardens was transferred to an HDFC
Yes.
controlled by New York City by the partnership, and a beneficial ownership was transferred to a private entity. What's the distinction?
Between, I'm sorry, I didn't follow.
Between legal ownership and beneficial
I'll
ownership.
have to find out officially what that
Okay,
answer is.
well, you can,
So, so in an instance when there's a for-profit owner who wants to use an Article 11 tax exemption, they have to partner with a nonprofit, and that nonprofit has to have at least 51% control, and that's the nominee owner. But the for-profit has the beneficial ownership. So it's for the period of the tax exemption.
thank you, Commissioner.
Want to join the staff? Any other questions for Beverly? Ms. Delahoo's.
So I just want to, because this would be subject to MIH, so 30% of the new units would be permanently affordable. And has the developer made a commitment about the length of affordability beyond the minimum requirement for the remaining balance of the affordable units that we're aware of?
I don't know, but I can find that out.
Okay.
Mr. Marin.
Beverly, do you have, thank you, Beverly. Hi, Beverly, how are you? Do you have a breakdown of the units by size, unit size?
I will definitely get that.
Just also want to know HUD is in the audience, so we can get answers to these questions when it comes back.
Any, Ms. Delahoo's?
And just, I'm going to ask my standard MIH question each time now, so maybe it'd be good to add them to the reports. If we could just know what the median income is in the community board, that would be really helpful.
Okay, I'll provide that.
Okay, any other questions?
Just wanted to know.
There's also going to be, sorry, there will also be a follow-up action, a site selection and acquisition that will be following this application for the parking that is on site.
Okay.
Okay, with that, certified.
Great. So Commissioner Efron can come back in.
Commissioner
She-
Efron can return.
Yes, and she recused herself from Lexington Gardens. And our next item is item number 2, page 41, proposed zoning map amendment, special permits, authorization, and zoning text amendment to facilitate a mixed-use building containing affordable housing in the West Farms neighborhood of the Bronx. And I think this area will be familiar to you all. Sean,
All right,
Deputy Director of the Bronx Office.
That's right,
is
that's
pinch
right.
hitting today.
good afternoon, Commissioners, Chair Weisbrot. It's nice to be up here again, presenting an affordable housing project for the Bronx versus awkwardly walking up and trying to answer questions, so I'm glad to be up here. So, real quickly, the applicant, Second Farms Housing Development Fund Corporation, is submitting an application to facilitate a new mixed-use affordable housing development at 1932 Bryant Avenue. That is a site owned by the New York Association for Catholic Homes. The development site is within the Bronx Park South large-scale residential plan in the West Farms neighborhood of Community Board 6 in the Bronx. This large-scale plan was part of a proposed modification that came before the commission. I'll get into a little more of that on 425, the Lambert Houses application. And so the large-scale plan was proposed to be modified as a result of that application, and the applicant site is now part of that modified Bronx Park South large-scale residential plan. A little bit about the surrounding area context. You can see Bronx Park and the zoo just to the north of the site. The new or proposed modified Bronx Park South large-scale plan is outlined in yellow here. You also have Crotona Park to the southwest, a 73-acre regional park. You have Boston Road and Bryan Avenue to the east. Major east-west corridor, Tremont Avenue, runs right through the site. And the 2-5, you can see it outlined in blue there, elevated rail line kind of snakes through the site and runs along the southern border of the large-scale and proposed project site. A little bit about the existing zoning and land use. The large-scale plan itself is governed by the underlying R71 zoning district, non-contextual zoning district, mid-density, permits mid-density residential up to 3.44 FAR. The uses within the existing large scale today include mid-density affordable housing. There is a NYCHA public housing site, community facility uses, a closed parking garage, and a few commercial uses located along the perimeter. North of the large scale, you have the proposed, the existing Lambert houses, which were, again, came through here on 425 with a zoning proposal to change the zoning to an R8 district. And a little bit to the south, you see there's an R8X here. That was part of the Crotona Park East West Farms rezoning, which came here in 2011. Additionally, a little bit to the east, you have this M district, which consists of an MTA bus depot and rail yards. There's some housing and commercial development within that M district as well. So this yellow boundary here is the original Bronx Park South large-scale redevelopment plan. It's a tough one to get out. And that's what came here on 425 as part of the Lambert Houses application. You can see the Lambert Houses there, these beige buildings in the northern part of the site. This is in fact the proposed modified large-scale residential development. In the purple, you have what is now proposed to be the Lambert Houses large-scale residential development. As part of that application, it was proposed to rezone the site to an R8 zoning district, which will facilitate the development of 1,600 affordable, 1,600 plus affordable housing units on that site. And what would happen there, that is proposed to take place over 10 years, where each one of these buildings here would be demolished and replaced with new buildings. Each one of the residents today, that is 700 plus residents, would have an option to move into one of those new buildings, so there would be no displacement there. That would be at the same level of affordability that they have today. Okay. And so, and then you can see in the yellow there, that is the, as a result of that proposed action, would be the new modified large scale, which contains the applicant site, which is parcel 9 here outlined in the red. A little bit about the project area today. You currently you have parcel 6 in the northwest corner here, which contains 90 units of affordable housing. Those are managed by Fordham Bedford Housing Development Corporation. Additionally, parcel 7, 204 units. Again, that's also through Fordham Bedford. There's a community center on that site as well. Parcel 8A is 231 units of housing. That site is also owned by the New York Association of Catholic Homes. And then parcel 8B is the NYCHA site within the development. It's called the 178th and Boston Road NYCHA site. Should come up with a name for that one. And what it contains is a 21-story tower with 221 units of housing and houses a community center as well. The proposed development site on parcel 9 here. Today the site, again, it's owned by New York Association of Catholic Homes. It contains a 4-story, 27,000 square foot parking garage and a 10,000 square foot commercial building. The garage today is currently derelict. It has been vacant since 2012. Originally, it was intended to contain up to 300 accessory parking spaces that would serve the residents of the Bronx Park South large scale, specifically the residents of parcel 6, 7, and 8A. The lower level, upon its opening, was deemed unsafe, was never used, and finally fully closed in 2012. After its closure, there were 73 at-grade spaces that are available to the residents of parcel 7, 6, 7, and 8A today. And then just kind of going through, you can see there, you have the parking garage right in the middle here. This is the 10,000 square foot, 1-story commercial site today. It contains a discount store, liquor store, and liquor store, and also a deli That's correct. And on the southern, the southeastern portion of the site, you have a large rock outcropping, and we'll get into that a little more. Just some images around the site today. You can see looking down East Tremont Avenue, looking west. This is that existing commercial I was talking about with the deli, liquor store, and discount store. You can see across the street here, this is some of the Ford and Bedford housing sites that are located within the large scale. This is looking across at some of the surrounding housing here. Again, on Bryant Avenue looking east, you can see that's the parking garage that's within the proposed development site. This is the rock outcropping looking down Bryant Avenue to the north. That's on the southeastern portion of the site. And then you can see again, so here is Boston Road looking east. You can see the elevated 2.5 rail line. It's very high here, and this is the proposed parking garage. This is the NYCHA development within the site, 21-story NYCHA tower as described earlier. Again, Bryant Avenue, or this is Boston Road looking south, just a different angle of the elevated rail line with that parking garage there today. And there, so the proposed actions will facilitate the development of the site as a mixed-use 12-story building with 290 units of affordable housing. That will include 14,500 square feet of retail to be located along Boston Road, so along the elevated line. You can see here is a massing rendering of the building as it would be located fronting along Boston Road there. It will additionally have 10,000 square feet of community facility space. That is anticipated to be a pre-K site. Parking is not required and will not be provided, although there are 73 accessory at-grade spaces available today. The at-grade spaces are located off-site. Talk a little bit more about that when we get into the parking waiver that is proposed. All of the units in the building, the proposed affordability will be under 80% AMI. It is proposed that 20% of the units will be affordable up to 30% AMI, and at least 25% of the units will be affordable below 60% AMI. The applicant is still in discussions with HPD on what that final mix will be, but they will all be affordable under 80% AMI. I think it's important to note with some of those lower numbers, some of those lower AMI numbers, that the median income in Community Board 6 is $19,300. So that is, again, very low and kind of matches with some of those lower numbers. Here's a site plan showing the proposed building. You can see the residential entrances will be away from the elevated rail line along Bryant Avenue. In addition, the landscape open space will be on that side of the building as well. Commercial uses and entrances will be located along the elevated space of the building here along Boston Road. And the community facility entrance located here, which is in fact we're flipped here, the northern portion of the site. Let's see. And so we can see the proposed actions that will be necessary to facilitate the proposed project. Will be, real quickly, I'll just read through and then I'll get into a little more detail. The zoning map change, modifications to the large scale, special permits and authorizations, and an amendment to Appendix F to map MIH. The zoning map change will rezone parcel 9, the development site, so the rezoning within the large scale will only be on those development site parcels from an R7 to an R8. It will additionally map a 100-foot wide C24 commercial overlay on a portion of parcel 9 along Boston Road. So that will be going from a permitted 344 FAR today to a 6.02 residential FAR with the R8, and that C24 will now permit neighborhood commercial up to an FAR of 2.0. And you can see the proposed zoning map change within the large scale here. There's the R8 portion from where it is the R7 today. Again, just kind of go through that. Additionally, the applicant will be proposing or is proposing a special permit to waive the required accessory off-street parking for existing affordable dwelling units located on parcel 6, 7, and 8A pursuant to zoning code section 74-532. And what this will do, this is in reference to the parking garage, which is there today. The parking garage has 233 permitted accessory spaces that were intended to be for parcel 6, 7A of the Bronx Park South large scale. Of course, this parking garage was shuttered in 2012. The applicant is asking to waive these permitted accessory parking spaces that are included in that parking garage today. The special permit will also seek to recognize as permitted accessory spaces the 73 at-grade spaces that are located within the large scale. You'll find the findings to this special permit in the briefing package, but again, there is no parking requirement for the proposed development site, and all of the other sites within the large scale are affordable housing as well. And you can see here's the location within the large scale of the 73 spaces. They're kind of spread out between the three sites pretty equally. Additionally, the applicant will be seeking special permits and authorizations within the large scale to allow the location of buildings without regard for rear yards and proposed height and setback waivers on a portion of the proposed building street wall frontage along the periphery of the Bronx Park South large scale plan. And so a little bit about those, and you can see in this drawing here, it's the rear yard encroachment here. It's 153 square feet. And, it's part of the kind of irregular geometry of the building creates this atypical rear yard condition. And the applicant is requesting to waive that portion of encroachment there. Will allow for a better distribution of the open space, which is located on the backside of the site here. Additionally, you can see the height and setback waivers ranging from 42 to 80 feet along the going from Tremont over to Bryant Avenue. And you can see that difference here. And what it really, it allows for a better relationship to the rail, distribution of open space, and in a more economical building. Really, that street wall frontage will be along Boston Road there. And you also have a 10-foot setback here along Boston Road that's along the elevated rail line, and it's 15 feet on this portion of Tremont. Will allow for a bit of a buffer along the elevated rail line there. And finally, you have the amendment to Appendix F to map a MIH designated area on the development site. Only this will be mapped on the proposed development site, on the rezoning site. It will be options 1 and 2 is what is being proposed. And you can see there, again, just the mix of housing. This development will be 100% affordable, all under 80% AMI.
Thanks, Sean. Questions? Ms. Delausse.
Sean, I'm just wondering, for the, because parcel 8A is owned, parcel 9 and parcel 8A are owned by the same organization.
Yeah.
Is there any plan to redevelop parcel 8A at this time?
So parcel 8A
Or is it just, I know this application is just about 9, but I'm just wondering.
Parcel 8, okay, parcel 8A. I could ask the applicant what their plans are for that site, but my understanding is there There is current housing on that site, and there are no plans
Okay.
to redevelop it.
And this is more
It's
just,
already an affordable,
yeah,
There's
no, I
already,
understand
there's
that.
current affordable housing there, and there are no
Yeah,
future plans for any redevelopment or changes to that site.
okay,
And I would just,
yeah,
kind of expounding upon your answer, the other,
your answer.
your question. The other sites, which are both owned by Ford and Bedford Housing, there has been recent work on those sites, which will allow them to extend their affordability at least another 20 years. So they did a full rehab.
I'm sure they have no
started a full rehab in
intention of
2011.
making it
Yeah.
anything but affordable housing. I guess my other question just has to do with the 73 parking spaces. So if the entire parking requirement is waived,
Sure.
so in the future, if those owners wanted to eliminate the at-grade parking, what would the process be?
They could come in, now there's an option to be able to waive that parking in a similar manner as this has been today. And again, those are not required parking spaces. The applicant is, as a part of this application, is proposing to waive all of those required accessory parking spaces. All it is additionally doing is recognizing those spaces that are there today as permitted parking.
Not required for this development, but they were required at one time for the other developments, for Ford and Bedford and for the,
So all of those spaces now with the demolition of this parking garage, those spaces, that requirement will be waived. Because they were all permitted accessory spaces for the large scale at one point.
I think I understood that, I guess, but there'll still remain 73 parking spaces.
Won't 73 spaces still be provided, and those spaces would be available pursuant to the developments within the large-scale?
Those 73 spaces will be provided, and they will be recognized as permitted accessory parking, but they are not required
In
accessory
relation to
parking.
this development,
Provided and
right.
available pursuant to the large scale.
Okay,
Right, they are not required spaces.
okay. Thank you.
Mr. Marin, then Ms. Efron.
Sean, thank you for the presentation. Two questions. One is the setbacks that you're referring to.
Right.
Are those on a specific floor? Because on the sections provided, they
Right.
don't seem to show on any floor, or is that a setback from sidewalk?
There's a height change on the site. The site has a grade that goes through, so that the height and setback requirement kind of changes as you go up the site. So it ranges from 42 feet at the beginning up to 80 feet as it goes through. If that makes sense.
I'm not understanding, no.
Because of the rock out.
Because, yeah,
You're saying there's 10 feet on the Boston Road side, right?
right.
So is that the physical building, or is there a setback in the building itself at a certain
So
story?
there's two. There is a setback from the street of 10 feet along Boston Road and then 15 feet along East Tremont, and that's a physical setback from the
The
sidewalk.
entire building was
Yep,
set back from
right.
the sidewalk?
Yep.
Okay, that's what I was trying to
Okay.
understand. And my second question is to the lot itself. Looking at slide 18, where you actually have the outline of the property,
Yep,
you actually follow the property on the western side and on the northern side, and then you cut through lot 71, which is a different property. Is there a reason that cutout is there? Or am I not understanding? You see, you have the red outline, that's the property itself.
right.
Then you have the black outline, which is the zoning
Which is
district line.
zoning boundary.
So my question is, why do we cut through lot 71?
To regularize the zoning line, and it won't have any effect on the actual development itself at site. So there is actually
An
these
existing building
two-
there, there's two existing
Yep,
buildings there.
two existing buildings there that are developed as, I think they're about 6 to 8 story affordable housing that's on those sites today.
But so then, if you're making, if 71 is being included, doesn't that add floor area to lot 71? Wouldn't that add floor area?
It's a small enough portion of the site where it will not have a significant effect on the site. You could, the answer is yes, it would. But if you, it would be rationalized across the site. So the amount of floor area that would be gained on that site is pretty insignificant. If that, I don't have the exact number of
The
what
reason,
that
the
would
reason why I'm
be.
asking.
We'll get you the exact
Yeah.
number of
Okay.
what gets added.
Sure.
Ms. Efron?
I had a question about those two buildings that sit behind the proposed
Right.
building, and with the rear yard setback waiver, what the condition is. Are there lot line windows at the back there?
There are.
Okay. I haven't seen any photographs that are clear to delineate
Okay.
what's going on there.
Trying to see if we have.
It's slide 9.
You can kind of see the condition here. Right. So there are.
I still don't see it. Here?
So slide 9, number 1,
Upside down.
does show
Sorry,
some of
wrong
those
page.
buildings there on East Tremont. You can see.
Okay. So,
But again, it's 153 square feet that's being requested in the rear yard waiver. And the height and setback waivers at that point would not have an additional effect on those development, or the existing parcels today.
well, except that they will be covering their windows, right? I mean, with the rear yard waiver.
Yes, but they would, they would without the rear yard waiver as well?
Okay.
Sure, and I mean, the difference, you're gaining more open space by allowing that rear yard waiver, but you're not having any significant additional impact on, you know, the height that the buildings would have already
Mhm.
without the requested waiver.
Okay.
Ms. Levin?
I don't think we can tell from our materials how the proposed new building would meet the building that Commissioner Efron has just referred to. You know, maybe those aren't legal lot line windows, but are they all going to be boarded up? Or is there just, on the commercial portion of the building, is it just a couple of stories and there's a,
So you can see here, this doesn't show very well.
yeah, no, so what's going on right behind? And what, you know, what does it look like from the East Tremont side? How much of a gap is there between the new development and the existing building?
You can see there, goes up to there. I mean, this is the proposed development site, and these are the existing buildings. And
Varies.
you can see kind of here. It's hard to get over there. So this would be the condition. Here's the proposed in gray, and you can see here are the existing buildings. Again, it's this little portion where there's the rear yard waiver request, but the building will be up.
We'll get
Yeah,
back to you.
close to it. Yeah, I can get some additional
Yep.
information on that.
Yeah, we can't tell from that slide
Sure.
what the situation is with the building on the neighboring lot.
Sure.
Other questions for Sean? Okay, certified, but we will get back to you on several questions, both regarding the lot line windows and the additional FAR that's created by the zoning law.
Okay, Commissioners, I just want to report that item number 3, the Westchester Square Replacement Branch Library, is being laid over. We expect to bring it back in a couple of weeks. And then we have 4 proposed acquisition of properties for the continued use of daycare centers. Since you haven't seen daycare centers in a while, I just wanted to make a few comments about them. So, you know, obviously, you know, we've been working with our sister agencies on these really important, critical facilities. And I just wanted to say that ACS has actually confirmed that all daycare centers in the city's portfolio are needed for the long term. So previous, so I just thought I would mention that to you all. You recall that there's been some conversation about that at some of your presentations. So they have confirmed that. And I also just wanted to note that work associated with the daycare centers, specifically those related to the 1990 approvals, prior to their expiration, which is why they're here again, that work has been completed. So what we're looking at now are new scopes of work for the facilities, which you have received in your packages. And just to note that you probably recall that there's been some concern about who's preparing the scopes of work for ACS given their scarce resources. So they have a relationship with the Department of Design and Construction, who actually are preparing, their scopes of work. And just one more thing, well, two more things. The city is funding ongoing repairs and maintenance for these facilities pursuant to these scopes of work, with the exception of one. Now, all of the parties involved apparently have signed off on the scopes of work, but the city will be funding those repairs. And there's one facility where the landlord and the city will be splitting those costs. And then last but not least, the next 4 presentations are really considered very critical facilities to advance. We have about, I think, a little bit over 30 applications that have been filed, but as you know, before we advance applications, under the strong direction of our chairman, we go out and we look at these facilities to confirm that they're in a state of good repair, and these facilities have been visited by staff and have been found to be in a state of good repair, even though you have scopes of work to address ongoing repairs and maintenance. And just one last thing, there's considerable market pressure on some of these sites, and that's one of the reasons why we're moving these 4 today. So, with that said, I am going to ask Manny to present our very first one.
Well, actually, just before Manny starts, do you have any questions just generally about the process and how this is being approached, just given our considerable involvement here and the commission's continued understandable concerns to make sure that these daycare centers are in a state of good repair and are appropriate given the troubled 40-year history involving daycare centers. So just in general to the issues that Jackie raised. Ms. Levin, and then Mr. Reade.
In addition to those other features, is there now a standardized approach to the term of years for which
Yes,
renewals will be sought?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question. 10 years.
10 years, and I think based on, obviously, previous discussion, that 10-year use of those properties will be codified in the commission's resolution.
Ms. Reade.
And I think that was part of my question, but I assume that confirms that they will come back at the end of the 10 years?
They will indeed.
Yes, they will. And many of you may still be here and get to see these 3 times, perhaps. And the only person who's not here today who's actually, okay, with that, Manny.
Okay, good afternoon, Commissioners. The Labor Bathgate Community Child Care Center is located in Community District Number 4. As you can see, it's the striped corner lot here. It's bounded on the north by East 173rd Street, on the east by Webster Avenue. To the south, you have Mount Eden Avenue, and Anthony Avenue forms the western boundary. It's a 2-story daycare center that's been in operation since 1973. Across the street from the site, you have the Claremont Park, this huge one here, and just north of that is another New York City Department of Parks facility here too. Adjacent to the site immediately north are 2 lots that are under the jurisdiction of ACS and have been used in the past as a play area for the facility. As you can see, it's within an R71 zoning district which permits the use. The block is also divided. You have an M1 zoning district which allows industrial and commercial uses. So you basically have commercial uses on this side, To the south, you have a fast food restaurant. Again, the center is a two-story building. It has approximately 18,800 square feet of area. 15,800 is actually interior floor space, and the remainder is a rooftop play area. As you can see, it's a better picture of the facility. Sorry about that. Well, I'll use this one here. You have the uppermost play area here, and then you have another one over here. This is the entrance to the facility, and this is the northern portion of the facility where you have one of the lots that I spoke about under the jurisdiction of ACS. We arrived at the facility during nap time. That's why you can't see the kids. If you look very closely, you can see that one is here, right? So the facility, as Jackie mentioned, is in a state of good repair. I saw no, I went on a field visit with representatives of ACS. We saw everything looked good. It's in a state of good repair, as Jackie said. You didn't have any leaking ceilings or any, it's well painted, well maintained. And here's just a photograph of the hallway. And the rooftop play area is in very good condition. I actually looked at both of them, and I was specifically looking for holes in the fence because there's a concern, just kids just falling off. And this is another portion of the area here. Now, the center is in operation from Mondays through Fridays from 8 in the morning to 6 p.m. The facility provides them with a supervised playtime. They also get the breakfast, lunch, and snack time, and also educational programs. There is a staff of approximately 28 professional paraprofessionals, and the facility itself accommodates up to 67 preschool children. The classrooms are basically on the first floor. You have 2 classrooms, and on the second floor, you have another 2 classrooms. The basement area that has a basement also is basically office space. You have a warming pantry and some offices there. But aside from that, again, the facility is in very, very good condition. Are there any questions?
Questions for Manny? Ms. Levin?
Is there ADA access to this building? It looks like everything involves stairs.
Well, no, there isn't. And the applicant, ACS, has a protocol to provide redirect sites. I'm still awaiting a list of those sites for this facility. So I'll have it by the time it
Okay,
comes
so
back.
that's not included in the scope of work to figure out how to
The
improve
ADA?
access?
Well, I'll double check.
That's actually a very
Yeah.
good question, and it should be included in the scope of
Yeah,
work.
because some of the
so-
other scopes do refer to ADA.
Yeah.
And this one
So
doesn't.
Okay.
We will pursue that because we'd obviously rather have kids be able to go here directly rather than be redirected.
Right.
Ms. Efron?
I know it's not required under code, but I just want it noted that, again, this is another daycare center without sprinklers. And since there is a long-term commitment to these sites, it just seems to me that maybe going beyond what's acceptable under old code may be worthwhile to pursue.
Okay, noted.
Definitely talk to our agencies about that.
Any other questions for Manny? Okay, certified.
Let's now advance to item number 5, page 105, proposed acquisition of property to facilitate its continued use as a daycare center in the East Williamsburg neighborhood of Brooklyn. And our presenter is Daphne Lundy of the Brooklyn office. We're on item number 5, page 105.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Wisebroad Commission. The property is located at 384 South 4th Street. It's known as Nuestros Niños Child Development Center. It is in Community District 1 in the South Side section. The child care facility has been at this location for 42 years. The building is privately owned and has been leased by the city since 1973. The last application for acquisition of the site was approved by the City Planning Commission on March 2nd, 1994. The 15-year lease for the property expired on January 3rd, 2015. The city has entered into a license agreement with the property owner and is awaiting execution of a new 10-year license lease agreement. The site is at 384 South 4th Street and is mapped within an R6 zoning district. To the north of the site, the neighborhood is characterized by 3 to 4-story residential buildings and multifamily buildings that have elevators. Abutting the site to the east is an open space lot under the jurisdiction of ACS. You can see it in the green here. It's used as a play area for the daycare center. Further east, 2 blocks down, is Union Avenue, which has a range of local commercial uses. To the west of the site are also a series of multifamily buildings. Broadway, a major commercial thoroughfare, is 2 blocks south of the site and developed with a variety of commercial uses. The daycare center is accessible by public transportation, including the J and M trains at Hughes Street and Broadway and the G train at Broadway. The site is also served by the B60, B46, and B40 lines. Nuestros Niños Child Development Center occupies the entire 3-story building, including cellar and 2 rooftop play areas. The building has 2 entrances and exits fronting on South 4th Street, shown here, one at each end of the building. The main entrance is at the east end of the building and has a security booth and the presence of a staff member to welcome visitors. The Child Care Center occupies a total of 27,629 square feet. 21,980 square feet is used for classrooms, offices, and kitchen space, which you can see here. There are 9 classrooms in total. And there are 2 kitchens. This is for preparing meals for the students, and this is a kitchen for the staff. There are also 2 open rooftop play areas totaling 5,649 square feet. This is one on the 4th floor shown here, and this is the Nova rooftop area on the 2nd floor. The center also uses 2 adjacent lots on the eastern side of the building, shown in the orange hatching, as playground area. The 2 lots totaling 4,448 square feet are city-owned parcels that are landscaped and have playground equipment, shown here. These lots are under the jurisdiction and management of ACS and are not part of this acquisition application. The Nuestros Niños Child Development Center is open from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and serves up to 140 preschoolers ages 2 to 5 years old. The program staff consists of 42 employees, including teachers, paraprofessionals, and support staff. The center provides the children with nutritionally balanced breakfast, lunch, and snacks daily. Under the supervision of a child care worker, children are encouraged to participate in indoor and outdoor activities, such as arts and crafts, music, that are appropriate to their age and level of development. The city planning staff toured the facility on February 9th, 2016 with ACS staff and confirmed that the facility was in good repair. I also toured the site myself May 26th. So the Department of Citywide Administrative Services request approval to facilitate the continued use of the building as a child care facility.
Thanks, Daphne. Questions for Daphne? No questions, Daphne. Okay. Certified.
So now let's go to item number 6, to be followed by item number 7. And I'd like to...
That's reassuring.
It's unprecedented, Jackie. It could have been followed by item number 4 or 3 or whatever. Okay.
And I'd like to introduce a new planner. She's making her very first presentation before the commission. This is Amy Pivak, and she has items number 6 and 7. But the first one is the Friends of Crown Heights Child Care Center 18, proposed acquisition of property in New York.
Couldn't resist.
Okay, good afternoon. So this first application is a proposed action by the New York City Administration for Children's Services and the New York City Department of Citywide Administrative Services for a public facility acquisition to facilitate a lease renewal for the continued use of the Friends of Crown Heights Child Care Center 18 as a child care facility. The facility is located in the East New York neighborhood of Brooklyn, Community District 5, at 851 Liberty Avenue. The site has been used to provide child care since 1971 and was the subject of a previous acquisition approved by the Commission in 1992. The center serves up to 87 preschoolers ages 2 to 5 and 31 children ages 5 to 12 in the after-school program. Children can attend the program full-time from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. The center is staffed by 22 members. I toured the facility in February of 2016 with ACS staff and confirmed that the facility is in a good state of repair. So the project site is located in an R5 zoning district with a C13 commercial overlay on a block bounded by Atlantic Avenue to the north, Milford Street to the east, Liberty Avenue to the south, and Montauk Avenue to the west. The C13 commercial overlay runs west of the project site for one more block along Liberty Avenue. To the south and east of the project site, a C23 overlay runs along Liberty Avenue. And there are small areas of M11 zone land in the southwest and north of the surrounding area. Surrounding land uses include residential with 1 and 2 family, as well as multifamily buildings, mixed commercial residential, industrial manufacturing, transportation and utilities, open space, parking facilities, public facilities, and vacant land. Residential uses dominate the area. Public School 345 falls within the surrounding area, as do several churches. The project area is accessible by public transportation with an AC train stop at Euclid Avenue 7 blocks away, a C train stop at Shepherd Avenue 5 blocks away, a JZ train stop at Norwood Avenue 2 blocks away, and the Q24 bus route along Atlantic Avenue. The facility is located on a privately owned lot, block 3976, lot 70, located on Liberty Avenue at the intersection of Milford Street. The building sits on a 10,000 square foot lot and includes 2 stories, a cellar, garage, and a roof for a total of 28,800 square feet, including 6,670 square feet of exterior rooftop space. The facility currently uses only 19,200 square feet of interior space on the first and second floors. The cellar and rooftop, currently vacant, were used by the facility in the past, and ACS wishes to preserve the potential to use these spaces in the future. In lieu of the rooftop, the center now uses an adjacent 7,000 square foot city-owned property under the jurisdiction and management of ACS, lot number 75, as a grade level play area. And this adjacent lot is not part of the application. So as previously mentioned, the facility is located in a 2-story building. The main entrance to the building is on Milford Street, and there's another entrance on Liberty Avenue. Both entrances have double doors into the facility. Here's a picture of the outdoor play area, which is, as I mentioned, under the jurisdiction and management of ACS, but is not part of the application. There's a multi-purpose room on the first floor, which is used as a play area in inclement weather. 2 out of 3 classrooms on the first floor are used for a school-age program serving children 6 to 12 years old. The second floor is 5 classrooms. There are 14 2 to 3-year-olds in one classroom, 16 children ages 3 to 3.5 in another, 20 children ages 3.5 to 4.5 in another, 20 children ages 4 to 5 years in another classroom, and 17 children ages 3 to 4 in the 5th classroom. Offices and storage are on the first and second floors of the building. The center provides a daily meal service, including breakfast, lunch, and a snack, which are prepared in an on-site kitchen shown here. A dumbwaiter leads from the kitchen on the second floor and services all floors. So to recap, to facilitate the project, the applicant requests public facility acquisition for the Friends of Crown Heights Child Care Center 18. Proposed action would facilitate the lease renewal for continued use of the property as a daycare center.
Thanks, Amy. Questions for Amy? Ms. Efron.
Well done on your first try. I wondered about the vacant space and whether it's accessible or to the daycare center or it's locked, basically how to monitor that for safety.
I know it's not used.
Do you mean the open space next to the?
No, I mean the
There's
space
a-
that they want to reserve
yeah.
the right to lease in the
The-
future that they've used before. Is the
basement.
premises demised properly, or is there, it just was unclear to me.
We can check on that. I assume it's locked. Double check.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, certified.
Amy has our next presentation, proposed acquisition of property in East New York for the continued use of the Children's Corner Child Care Center. We're on item number 7, page 151.
This is going to be somewhat similar.
Well, now that you're a veteran.
Yes,
Amy,
now that I'm a veteran, again, feels great. Okay.
so,
Okay, so here's another proposed action by the New York City ACS and DCAS. or a public facility acquisition to facilitate a lease renewal for the continued use of the Children's Corner Child Care Center as a child care facility. The facility is located in the East New York neighborhood of Brooklyn, Community District 5, at 565 Livonia Avenue. The site has been used to provide child care since 1974 and was the subject of a previous acquisition approved by the Commission in 1992. The center serves up to 176 children who can attend the program full-time from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. The center has 55 staff. I toured the facility in February once again with ACS staff and confirmed that the facility is in a state of good repair. The project site is located in an R6 zoning district, is on a block bounded by Dumont Avenue to the north, Georgia Avenue to the east, Livonia Avenue to the south, and Alabama Avenue to the west. Commercial overlays run along Livonia Avenue with C24 directly adjacent to and across from the project site, and C23 further east along Livonia Avenue. There's a zoned park fronting on Livonia Avenue 1 block west and an R7A district to the south of the project area. Surrounding land uses include residential with 1 and 2 family and multifamily buildings, mixed commercial residential, office, public facilities, open space, and vacant land. New multifamily housing developments are located along Livonia Avenue and Georgia Avenue, and a park fronts Livonia between Alabama and Williams Avenues. St. Joseph's Medical Center and Public School 174 are also located in the vicinity. The number 3 subway line runs elevated along Livonia Avenue with an entrance at Pennsylvania Avenue 2 blocks east of the project area. The project area is also served by the L subway line at Livonia Avenue and Van Sinderen Avenue 5 blocks away, and the B20 and B83 buses each stop within 2 blocks. The facility is located on a 10,000 square foot privately owned lot, block 3803, lot 46, located on Livonia Avenue at the intersection of Georgia Avenue. The building contains 39,400 square feet of floor area and includes 2 stories, a cellar, and a rooftop play area. The interior space totals 29,800 square feet, and the rooftop play area is 9,600 square feet. The ACS Child Care facility currently occupies and uses the entire building. As mentioned, the facility is located in a 2-story building, including a cellar and rooftop play area. The main entrance to the building is on Livonia Avenue, and another door used as an emergency exit is located on Georgia Avenue. On the first floor of the entrance, a reception area, administration offices, and 1 multi-purpose room. This is a picture of the roof above, which is entirely a play roof. There are 4 classrooms in the cellar, 2 of which are separated by a folding partition that can be retracted to make a sizable multi-purpose room. 2 other cellar classrooms are used for miscellaneous preschool learning activities. The first floor has 5 classrooms. 1 classroom is occupied by toddlers aged 2 years old, and 4 classrooms are occupied by preschool children ages 3 to 4 years old. The second floor has 6 classrooms, 3 of which are occupied by toddlers aged 2 years old, and 3 of which are occupied by preschool children aged 3 years old. In addition to the classrooms, the cellar contains 3 additional related instruction rooms, offices, and staff rooms, along with the utility rooms. The second floor has 3 offices, a physical therapy room, and a multi-purpose room. The kitchen, shown here, is located on the first floor. The center provides daily meal service, including breakfast, lunch, and a snack, which are prepared in the on-site kitchen. A dumb waiter provides food conveyance from the first floor kitchen to the cellar. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Ms. Efron.
Sorry. You mentioned the classrooms in the cellar. Do they have windows? I couldn't tell if the photos referred to the cellar classrooms or to the 3rd floor classrooms. And if they don't, how many hours are the kids in those rooms, or are they predominantly occasional rooms?
Okay, I'll have to double check on that.
Other questions for Amy? Ms. Levin.
Amy, just to double check, because it wasn't mentioned in either of your briefing sheets, these also are for a term of 10 years?
I believe so, yes.
All the ones that are going to come before us
Okay.
are for a term.
Yeah,
of
but 2
10.
sheets spelled it out and 2 sheets didn't mention, so
Okay.
I'm just doubling down.
You have to be consistent.
But this consistent presentation and the scopes of work and the way these were all set up for us, these 2 and the other 3, lots of good work.
We're getting there.
Yep.
Thank you, Amy. Certified.
Now we'll move to item number 8, page 174, proposed zoning map amendment to establish a C22 district within an R31 district To facilitate a public parking garage along 227th Street, our presenter is Stephen Everett from the Queen's Office. He's our lead project planner on this. It's our first pre-hearing item. We're on item number 8, page 174.
Good afternoon, Chairman Weisbrod and Commissioners. Idle Lots LLC filed an application to rezone a portion of one block located at the intersection of 227th Street and 145th Road in Brookville, Queens Community District 13. This would facilitate the development of a public parking lot of approximately 25 spaces. The project area is located in an R31 zoning district, established in 2004 as a result of the city planning-sponsored Brookville rezoning. Prior to 2004, the site was zoned R32. The project area consists of 2 tax lots located within block 13484. Lot 1, which is at the corner of 227th Street and 145th Road, is approximately 10,000 square feet in area and is immediately adjacent to Lot 36, with frontage on 145th Road and is approximately 2,000 square feet in area. The surrounding area is characterized primarily by residential and manufacturing uses within a 600-foot radius. On the southwest side of 145th Road, there's a block and a portion of another block located within an M11 zoning district, improved with commercial warehouse buildings owned by the applicant. The block located to the east of the project area, on the east side of 228th Street, is zoned R31 and contains a C13 overlay, improved with 1-story attached buildings, including a deli, a beauty salon, and a house of worship. The remainder of the 600-foot radius around the project area, west of 227th Street and north of 146th Road, is located in R31 zoning district, predominantly improved with small detached 1- and 2-family residential buildings. Again, south of the project area are 3 warehouses owned by the applicant. The applicant acquired these 2 buildings on the western block, located here, in 2012, and has since renovated them. One is occupied by a Verizon garage used for the operations of trucks and equipment. The other is a warehouse with 5 logistics and freight forwarding businesses. And across 227th Street to the east is what's called the logistics facility, located on block 13475. This was completed in 2014. It's fully occupied with 5 additional logistics facilities and provides all required parking spaces on site. Additionally, the applicant acquired the lot at the southeast corner of this block here and has a certificate of occupancy for an additional 24 vehicle parking spaces. And in response to several questions posed at the March 7th review session, the applicant submitted the additional following information, stating that the area has limited mass transportation and limited parking on surrounding residential streets. The logistics facility, again, that's this facility, has approximately 138 employees and 65 parking spaces. And the other logistics facility west of 227th Street has approximately 93 employees and 85 parking spaces. No payment is being collected for either of these parking lots at the time. And both of these facilities, although they provide all required parking, they do not provide 1 space for each employee. And the applicant states that this proposed new parking lot in the project area here will help satisfy parking needs for these facilities and others in the area. And because they state that stackers would not be convenient on either of the existing parking lots, that this proposed development is reasonable. So the applicant professionally certified permits with DOB to install a sidewalk along 227th Street, clean and regrade the project area, and control stormwater runoff by installing a drainage system and catch basin with dry wells. As part of the regrading process, the site was excavated to remove and dispose of several tons of debris, and the area was paved with asphalt and striped for parking purposes. Additionally, the applicant professionally certified a DOB permit to install a curb cut on 145th Road. City Planning sent a letter to Department of Buildings suggesting there might be a potential misuse of this property. And in response, Department of Buildings issued 3 ECB violations, one for work without a permit, one for a lot occupied without a valid certificate of occupancy, and one for illegal use in a residential district. And the applicant team will be here on Wednesday to address these open violations and speak to other parking conditions in the area. So the applicant proposes one map change, which is a rezoning from R31 to R31 C22 to establish a commercial overlay at a block depth of 100 feet and a width of 120 feet. The C22 commercial overlay allows a maximum FAR of 1.0 for both commercial and community facility uses. Because of the expansion of uses in rezoning from residential to commercial, the site could be developed with a building of approximately 5,100 square feet with on-site required parking. And so because the rezoning would allow this development, or although it would allow this development, the applicants propose a public parking lot of approximately 25 spaces located on both lots 1 and 36, the entirety of the project area. Public parking lots are allowed as of right in the C2 district at a maximum of 150 spaces. The site plan shown here is illustrative and would require Department of Buildings approval. It would be intended for public off-street parking purposes and would serve the existing commercial uses on 228th Street as well as the applicant-owned logistics facilities. The area will be accessed by an approximately 27-foot wide existing curb cut on 145th Road and is intended to reduce the number of on-street parking spaces otherwise occupied on residential side streets. Queens Community Board 13 held a public hearing on April 18th, and with a vote of 32 in favor, 0 opposed, and 0 abstaining, recommended approval of the rezoning. The Queensborough President recommended approval of the application on May 23rd, and Councilmember Richards provided a letter of support, which is in your briefing package, letter of support for the application citing the revitalization merits of this project in context with the other improvements the applicant team has made in this area. Thank you.
Questions? Ms. Efron and then Mr. Cirillo.
Was the community board aware of the open ECB violations and that apparently the work had been done without
They were
going
aware.
through the process?
They were aware, but the community believes that because there's this shortage of on-street parking already, that, I mean, if the application, or if the open violations were to be cleaned up, that in effect, this proposal is a good one for the community.
Mr. Cirillo.
So just in the same sort of line of questioning, and obviously a violation for the illegal use of the property makes sense, since that's why they're here, to legalize the ability to put the parking lot in an otherwise impermissible zoning area. Who's parking in there now? Do we know? Is it functioning as a public parking area now, or is there just people, I mean, in the photos, there are cars there. So is it being used for the purpose that this application is being sought? Or is it just some use of the cars that day that got trapped in a photograph?
To my knowledge, it's technically not being used for the exact purposes they're proposing this application. So these photos also show a gate. So at the time, the applicant stated that they were using the parking lot for their employees of their logistics facilities, and the proposal would establish a public parking lot.
Correct.
So it's not exactly the same use, but it's also not technically a legalization application, because as it's constructed, it would have to change, it would have to be modified to allow the 25 spaces. So the existing conditions are actually different from this illustrative, which provides planting strips and other required amenities.
Okay, so I'm sorry, just clarify that comment for me. So there's something that exists now that we see in the photograph, okay? And there's an application before us to create the ability in an otherwise residential area to provide the opportunity to put a public parking lot of some size there.
That's correct, yes.
Now, since there's already one there that looks like something, what happens next if we approve this for it to be a legal parking lot? Never mind the license that they would need to become one from another agency.
Sure, so based on the illustrative plans that they provided us, this drawing differs in that there are required planting strips around
Back to the-
portions of the lot, and you can sort of see the photos. It's hard to see here, but these are not provided, so it's completely paved one side to another at the moment. So that would have to be rectified, in addition to clearing the violations themselves. So it would not exist exactly as it does today.
So as part of this, and again, this is just to clarify this, as part of this, the legal version of the parking lot would be built if they want to continue to use the opportunity to put one there for the purposes they intend. So it's not just about the overlay. There is a specific site design that will be required to create a legal parking lot that is also a part of this.
Well,
There's no site plan associated with the zoning map amendment.
right. So
Oh,
they,
right,
so they
okay.
provided us an illustrative, which we believe complies to the
Okay.
best of our knowledge, but it would have to be approved by Department of Buildings and is different from what exists today on site.
In
So
a
there's
separate
landscaping and some
application.
buffering that they're showing on the illustrative site plan, which currently doesn't exist today according to our
Okay,
field
I
trip.
understand. Okay, thank you.
So today, what can this be, prior to our action, what can this be used for, if anything?
Well, it's a low-density residential district,
Um,
so a house, a residence.
So it can't be used for parking at all?
No.
It
Today.
certainly cannot be used for commercial
What?
parking. It certainly cannot be used for commercial parking, no.
For any kind of accessory parking?
Accessory to commercial, no.
So, as of now, there are still cars parked there, as far as we know. Is that right?
As far as I know, yes.
So, this application, which came here in a disturbing fashion to begin with, because the original application showed a vacant lot, even though at that time the lot had already been built out, and has received several violations from the ECB. Not only, as far as we know, not only have those ECB violations not been responded to or satisfied, but in effect, the operation of the lot basically continues to ignore what zoning requires. Is that a fair statement?
That is what I believe is true, but again, the applicants can respond to that.
I look forward to hearing from the applicant on Wednesday. Ms. Delos.
So just to clarify, approximately how many cars can park there now? And you said there's 25 in the future, is that correct?
Yes, the proposal is for approximately 25 spaces. I believe there are approximately 38 now.
Okay, so I guess during the hearing on Wednesday, we can ask whether or not they've planned for that decrease in demand in
Right.
some way.
Ms. Efron.
Just to ask a question and then request some information. This is the same owner, or principals are the same as one of the logistics building, is that correct?
As both of them.
Both of the logistics building?
Yes,
Do-
they're affiliated companies, but it's,
And will we hear from the applicant about whether or not it's a condition of their role as a landlord to provide parking in excess of what they have already provided?
they can certainly speak to that, yes. I mean, it's, of course, not required under zoning. They've provided what is,
No, I just meant in terms of the lease.
sure, okay, got it.
Any other questions for Stephen? Ms. Levin.
Yeah, I guess I have a question for our council, which is, what are the consequences of having filed an apparently false application with us initially? So I understand it, Stephen, you sent us a memo in March, and when we certified this, indicating that the original application stated that the project area was vacant and unimproved. That, I gather, your inspection at the time revealed to be an untruth. And what consequences does that entail, beyond the DOB violation?
Well, in short, really no consequences.
It's not under penalty of
because it's
perjury
not under
or anything
penalty
like
of
that?
perjury, that's correct. If it had been under penalty of perjury, you could try to, file a claim against them. But, our understanding also from the applicant's attorney who filed the application was that they were not aware of the condition on the site at the time that the application was filed, because they hadn't been to physically see it, and they were relying on their clients. But the short answer is there is no
Not much.
consequence.
Okay.
Sorry.
So then just one more question.
Certainly.
In order to be legal, this is going to have to be a public parking garage? This is a Stephen question, I believe. Too bad.
I can feel this
Or
one.
maybe it's an applicant question. In order to be, so it has to be a public parking lot. How are they going to assure that it is available to the public? I think you told us at certification that it would be attended and that there would be a fee structure that would be determined. I hope in the course of the hearing we can get more information from the applicant about how they're going to operate this in a way that is truly open to the public.
Yes, they'll be able to address the second portion of your question. The first is that it would have to be public because the commercial overlay would not allow an accessory parking lot that is accessory to the existing logistics facility. So that is the route that they have chosen and decided that it would meet their needs. And they can address how that will be managed to ensure it's public.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cirillo.
Just would, I'm just whipping through the pages here. Aside from the requirement that it would have to be a public parking lot, is there any other use that this property will be able to be converted into based on the overlay?
Yeah.
That we're not limiting the use to the parking lot, even though it already exists and everybody has supported this based on the need for parking. But the day after tomorrow, there is nothing that prohibits the owner from doing anything that would be then permissible under the overlay.
That's correct. And in fact, the environmental assumptions.
Which is the case in any situation, I understand that, but just based on the fact that this is so specific to the parking lot, I just, yeah.
That's the intended use.
Thank you.
It is the intended use.
The intended use.
And the environmental assumptions actually assumed a reasonable worst case of a building of approximately 5,100 square feet. So that is essentially what the maximum development capacity for that commercial portion of the use would occupy. But again, we're not tying them to a site plan, and they propose a public parking lot.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Della?
Sorry. So would it be within scope to tie them to a site plan?
Not for a straightforward rezoning, no.
Okay.
Would it be within scope to tie them to a site plan? That's correct. Okay. Who do we expect to be here to seek to advance this application on Wednesday?
I expect the applicant and the applicant's counsel to be here.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Levin?
It'd be really helpful if the applicant was here in person, not just counsel.
Understood.
Although both would be very helpful under the circumstances. Thank you, Stephen.
So our next pre-hearing item is item number 9, page 187, proposed special permit to facilitate accessory parking spaces. A building to be developed at 70 Vestry Street. And our presenter is Joel Copeland, lead project planner from the Manhattan office. Item number 9, page 187, 70 Vestry Street parking facility, back for pre-hearing presentation.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners. So this is a private application for a special permit pursuant to Sections 1345 and 13451 for 42 accessory off-street parking spaces within an as-of-right residential development at 70 Vestry Street in the Tribeca neighborhood of Manhattan Community District 1. The application is returning for a public hearing following review by Manhattan Community Board 1 and the Manhattan Borough President. The project area is a zoning lot, which is located here on the map. Actually, let me do this right here. It's generally bounded by DeBrosa Street to the north, Vestry Street to the south, Washington Street to the east, and West Street to the west. It consists of lots, if you want to look at a zoomed-in version, it consists of lots 20, 3, and 13. The only lot on the block that's not included in the project area and the zoning lot is lot 18 right here. So the applicant intends to construct a 12-story building with a penthouse and that includes 47 residential units. The primarily residential building will include ground floor community facility or commercial space and storage and amenity space, and then the proposed parking facility. So pursuant to Section 1311A, only 9 parking spaces are permitted as of right in this development. In order to provide the 42 accessory off-street parking spaces proposed, a special permit is requested pursuant to Sections 1345 and 13451. So the parking facility would be entered from DeBrosa Street, which is it's a one-way street, allowing cars to go west. And then once cars enter, they would go into the interior courtyard and enter into a vehicle elevator, which would bring cars to the parking facility, which is located on 2 below-grade levels, a cellar and a sub-cellar. And then when cars exit the building, they exit out onto Vestry Street going east. So here are the 2 levels of parking. There's a cellar and then the sub-cellar. So on March 26, 2016, Community Board 1 voted to issue a resolution by a vote of 36 in favor, 1 opposed, and 0 abstentions to recommend approval of the application on the condition that the applicant consider the provision of appropriate local amenities for the surrounding rapidly growing residential community. On May 31st, 2016, the Manhattan Borough President recommended approval of the application.
Questions for Joel? Ms. Levin?
Joel, where's the residential access to this building? Is it in the center of the drive-through?
I'm not, I think.
Okay, I tell you why I ask.
Yeah,
Because
so
looking at this initially, I had the question of why the drive-through was running north-south rather than south-north, because if you're just trying to access the garage, the most benign approach would be down the West Side Highway, left turn into the garage, stay off the city streets, exit onto West Street. And so I still have that question. Why is it running that direction? It would seem that would have the minimal impact on the surrounding streets. But I'm wondering if the location of the residential entrance is a feature of it, that if the only way into the building is, off of that drive-through, there's also going to be traffic coming from inland and through.
Yeah, I'm not, I believe that's the case,
Yeah,
but I
you
think
go.
the applicant could speak to that at the public hearing
Yeah,
and
good.
talk a bit
Thank
more
you.
about that.
Who is going to be here, Joel? Is it?
So the applicant's representative will be here. I'm sure the community board and borough president will also be speaking.
Okay. Any other questions for Joel? Ms. Ortiz?
Hi. Less a question than, sort of an acknowledgement of the borough president's comments and concerns. While she did approve it, I'm sympathetic to the concerns about the methodology that we use. And I would request that we have an opportunity to hear a little bit more about the methodology. There's some discretionary, there's some discretionary action there, or to the extent that I understand it, that there might be an opportunity to address the concerns about, the set of factors we use to make the determination here, to continue to encourage a one-to-one parking ratio in what, this would be technically a transit zone, right? Because it's within 0.5 miles of a subway station. So, any affordable housing here would not have a parking requirement, yet we're allowing a one-to-one ratio
Well,
for,
although, to be noted, that the people who can afford to live here are certainly likely to either have cars or private chauffeurs or whatever.
and we acknowledge that, and the borough president made the point that, if we applied a robust set of, criteria here, we would probably still allow this at this location because it's right off the West Side Highway. But this is not the first time we've faced.
But I think your point is well taken, that we, to have a broader discussion about our parking methodology, and we will schedule it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Joel? Okay, public hearing, Wednesday.
Joel also has our next project, item number 10, page 249, proposed zoning map amendment to facilitate commercial use in the Lower East Side neighborhood of Manhattan along East Houston Street. Item number 10, page 249, our second Manhattan pre-hearing application.
Okay. So again, this application is coming back to the commission as a pre-hearing item after review by Manhattan Community Board 3 and the Manhattan Borough President. The application seeks approval of a zoning map amendment to map a C25 commercial overlay to a depth of 100 feet over a 2.5 block, over 2.5 blocks on the south side of East Houston Street in the Lower East Side and Manhattan Community District 3. The proposed action will facilitate ground floor commercial use in a 13-story mixed-use building at 255 East Houston Street, located in here, indicated in red. The site, again, is located on East Houston Street, between Norfolk Street and Suffolk Street, and the site also does have frontage on Suffolk Street. So the map to the right here shows the boundaries of the proposed rezoning area. They span from Norfolk Street to the west to the mid-block or the center line of Clinton and Attorney Streets to the east. The western portion of the rezoning area is currently RAA, and commercial use is not permitted as of right. The western portion of the rezoning area includes a C15 commercial overlay. That commercial overlay is on both sides of Clinton Street. So the proposed rezoning area would just put a C25 commercial overlay over the entire area. I should also note that this is mapped with the voluntary inclusionary housing program. So you get a bonus for including affordable housing here. Also note, 4 of the 12 sites in exclusively the RAA portion are occupied by existing commercial uses, and these are not in complying with the underlying RAA district regulations. These uses primarily include retail, eating and drinking establishments, and the as-of-right commercial uses in the C15 area are the same kinds of retail uses. Also want to note that there's commercial overlays on the north side of Houston Street with retail there as well. So the Applicant is proposing, again, a zoning map amendment that will facilitate the construction of ground floor retail in a new mixed-use building at 255 East Houston Street. The proposed development site, the building would include 63 residential units, and 12 of which will be affordable, and the building in total would rise to 120 feet. Commercial uses, again, aren't permitted in REA districts, and the proposed rezoning would allow for likely use group 6 eating and drinking establishments or retail. The application was certified and referred out to the public on February 22nd. At its March 2016 full board meeting, Manhattan Community Board 3 adopted a unanimous resolution with 42 in favor of recommending denial of the application without conditions. And on June 1st, the Manhattan Borough President recommended disapproval of the application. Happy to take questions.
Questions? No questions? All right, who's coming on Wednesday?
So the applicant will be here, the applicant's counsel will be here. We expect Community Board 3 to attend, as well as the Manhattan Borough President.
Okay. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
So moving on to our Wednesday, June 8th, future votes discussion. In addition to the 3 hearing items that you were just presented, staff had prepared favorable resolutions for the following. The office space for 260 East 161st Street for the Law Department and the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner's Office. We have several landmark applications, including the William Schofield House, Greenwood Cemetery Entrance and Chapel, and Sickland House Landmark, as well as the Park Slope Historic District Extension 2. We have the St. Michael's Episcopal Church Parish House and Rectory Landmark, as well as 57 Sullivan Street House. We're unaware of any conflicts with the zoning resolution, projected public improvements, or projects in the vicinity of the landmarks or historic district. We also have the office space application for the Department of Buildings offices at 55 Chambers Street, 7 East 19th Street, which is proposed authorization to facilitate residential use within an existing building. We have another landmark, John William and Linda Bell Al's House Landmark in Queens, as well as the Pepsi Cola sign landmark. We have an additional office space application for the NYPD at 118-35 Queens Boulevard. We also have the Vanderbilt Mausoleum landmark in Staten Island. We have a proposed authorization for 30 Cunard Avenue involving a special hillsides preservation district. Authorization to facilitate a masonry stairway for a single-family home. We have special South Richmond Development District zoning lot subdivisions from 1 to 2 zoning lots at 165 Pleasant Plains Avenue. We also have a special South Richmond Development District zoning lot subdivision from 1 to 3 zoning lots at 334, 338, and 342 Manhattan Street in Staten Island. We have a special South Richmond Development District to facilitate a zoning lot subdivision from 1 to 3 zoning lots at 115 Macon Avenue, and we have a special South Richmond Development District certification to facilitate a pool for a single-family home within designated open space at 22 Mason Boulevard. And last but not least, we have the renewal of a previously approved authorization in the Special Hillsides Preservation District to facilitate residential development in a project known as Westervelt Estates. And then moving on to June 22nd, we have the 2700 Stillwell Avenue proposal. We had a hearing a couple of weeks ago. Proposed special permit to modify yard regulations to facilitate a 1-story warehouse. We have staff here available. Trins is here in case you have any follow-up questions from the hearing. Okay. And we have Mr. Marshall, Edwin Marshall here, with respect to the Broadway Sherman. He's our project planner for the Broadway Sherman rezoning, which involves zoning text and map amendments to facilitate mixed-use development in the Inwood neighborhood of Manhattan. So,
Any questions about that? We continue to get comments in from the public, which we forward to you as soon as we get them. But Edwin is here to answer questions. Ms. Levin.
Well, I guess I did.
I wouldn't want to waste Edwin's time having come up for for the meeting. You know, for me, some of the most compelling testimony we heard was about the appropriateness of essentially doubling the allowed density in the area, going from an R7-2, which is mapped pretty, I mean, it's hard to imagine a neighborhood that has a more consistent context than that particular area of Upper Manhattan. And whether it's appropriate, well, I think a lot of people challenge the appropriate, at the public hearing, challenge the appropriateness of jumping from an R7-2 to a mix of R8, R9, A and X, which is its own sort of jump, and then you add the extra floor area that you get as a result of mandatory, and you've essentially doubled the allowed floor area there. But Edwin, isn't it the case that in that very strong built context, many of those, what's the basic built FAR in those surrounding buildings? I believe you told us in an earlier briefing session that in fact, many of those buildings which do provide that very strong neighborhood context are overbuilt.
That's correct.
Are you able to say what the built FAR is in the surroundings?
I can tell you the range of FAR. On the neighboring blocks surrounding this particular project site, the buildings are basically 5- and 6-story buildings, new law tenements.
Right.
Buildings that were built when the A train was built and moved northward into this neighborhood. These buildings are high lot coverage buildings. For the most part, they have anywhere, and this is a range, anywhere between, let's say, 5 FAR to maybe slightly more than 6 FAR.
Okay. So they're closer to R8 in terms of
They're
the way
closer,
they're built out.
the larger buildings are closer to the R8, which has a maximum residential FAR of 6.02.
Okay.
And also in the R7-2, the maximum community facility FAR is 6.5. So it's somewhere within that range as well.
Right, okay, so the jump is not really as huge as it may initially appear, if you just look at it on a zoning map.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Delus?
Do we happen to have any updates about where the conversations are between the developer and HPD? I know that was a big part of a follow-up.
The conversations are ongoing. They've had some discussions since the public hearing. We anticipate that those conversations will continue.
I guess,
Which means the answer is no.
yeah, no, I understand, yeah. Yeah. I guess, because what I heard from the community was that they understood that all of the housing, that the developer was committing to 100%, that the affordable component was gonna be permanently affordable. Even though at the hearing, that's not exactly what their consultant indicated. So it would be helpful to get that clarification. I would find it helpful before we vote to know what the status of that commitment is.
I don't know if we do know or will know, but I do think you're right that is an open issue for sure. I think it was not something that was nailed down. Ms. Efron?
There was something compelling about several discussions about the facade of the existing building and its historic nature, whether clearly it's not landmarked. I have no idea if it's on any potential landmark list. It didn't sound as if anyone was making that claim. But just the idea that it spoke to neighborhood character and was at least a visual landmark, if not a historic landmark within the district. And I gather there's been no more conversation from the developer about incorporating any parts of that. But
No, not that I'm aware of, no.
thank you.
Any other questions for Edwin? We'll try to get clarification on these questions. I don't know if we'll get answers, but we'll try.
May I?
Sure.
And the other thing that came up a number of times during the hearing was just the visual corridor issue that some folks raised specific to the park, and I'm just wondering if we have clear sense of whether it is an issue or not as proposed.
I can tell you that in terms of an established visual corridor, it doesn't exist. It's not mapped on any map or anything like that. Either direction, whether you're looking up from Broadway towards the cloisters, or if you're looking from the cloisters down to Broadway.
I'm not quite sure what question you're answering, Edwin. The answer is there is no visual corridor.
That's correct. That's what I'm answering, yeah.
Right, but,
Both ways, you're saying,
In either direction.
from the
Yeah.
cloisters or from the.
right. Ms. Ortiz and then Ms. Levy.
But there, I guess the question is with this reduction in height, I mean, under the previous scenario, you could see the building. Do we have a sense of, with this reduction in height, that you will still be able to see, the building from the cloisters, or, are we slightly below the tree line, or is there any sense of where we might fall?
You probably would not be able to see it from the cloisters. It is the proposed revision in the build program at 155 feet is almost 90 feet lower than what they were proposed as certified. So you wouldn't be able to see it.
Okay, thank you.
I thought we had actually seen a couple of perspectives that showed that in fact, you couldn't see it from the
That's correct.
cloisters.
In the images that I showed at the pre-hearing, yes.
That was a concern that they brought up, community brought up, somebody had
Ms. Levin, did you?
Well, to that point, I was just going to ask, are we going to get, I assume we will get revised environmental, the environmental assessment as part of, which we'll have a chance to review before taking any action on this?
The Director of Environmental Review is shaking his head.
Nodding. And he's
Just
not
want him to feel
nodding.
appreciated, that we actually do look at his stuff.
He's very grateful.
To that end, though, may I?
Yeah.
Sorry. And perhaps the updated environmental review will speak to this, but there was obviously quite a bit of confusion about the worst-case scenario in the prior environmental review. So to the extent that the revised one can help answer the questions that came up from the community, that would, I think, be very helpful.
Okay. Any other questions for Edwin? Madam Secretary, is there any other matter to come before us today?
Absolutely none.
With that,
You're done. You're done.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned till Wednesday.